Sometimes they improvise. I mean,
You start projecting. If I talk, can people hear me? Okay. We're going to try it without microphones, and if you can't hear us, then I'm sure you'll let us know. We start? Okay. Are you guys okay if we don't use mics? Will you be able to hear us? I'm talking to the
Oh, yeah,
camera.
sounds good.
Okay. Great. All right. All right, so I'm calling this meeting back to order. Welcome to the Princeton Council meeting of February 24th, 2020. And this is a special meeting because we have a special guest with us tonight, President Chris Eisgruber. And this is what's come to become an annual conversation with the university president, and it gives council an opportunity to talk to Chris about issues that are important to the municipality and also important to the university. And we've really come to appreciate this tradition, and I think every year it's a little different, but I think it has gotten actually better and more productive over the years. So I want to thank you for coming and making this an annual tradition. So I don't know if you had some opening comments you wanted to start with. And we do need to pledge. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, well, I was going to carry on. I mean, I will say that there are a lot of issues that we've been working collaboratively with the university, and then there's also so many issues that I know the university is working on, that the municipality is working on also, where there's probably even more opportunity to work together. So I know equity is a big issue for both of us, sustainability is a big issue for both of us. We're both struggling with affordability, with managing growth, with transportation, right? Is that better? Woo! Okay. And we have the chief here tonight, and I know there's issues of public safety, and how do we do that in a way that's serving the community. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you. We have about an hour for our discussion, and after you make some, whatever comments you want to share with us, then we'll open it up for a discussion with the rest of council.
Great. Do we in fact need this?
no, is
Yeah,
there a reason?
Okay, I think it's better. I think
You think it's
it's nicer
better?
without
Okay.
it. Well, I don't know. I think I agree.
So if we can turn it off, maybe we can do that.
See, cooperation, right?
Open channels of communication, amplify. Liz, I have only brief comments to make. First, I want to thank you and the council once again for welcoming me and giving me this chance to communicate with you about issues that are of mutual concern to us. I want to take a moment, Liz, to especially thank you. I know you have more time in your term as mayor, but this is probably the last of these open meetings that we're doing together, and I really appreciate what you have done, first of all, on behalf of the university, to create open channels of communication between the town and the university to help foster collaboration around these areas that you just mentioned of shared interest, and both as president of the university and as a resident here in Princeton, I want to thank you for your leadership and for your commitment to this very special town, and for the love of place that has enabled you to do this with such patience and commitment over so many years. So it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you during your term. I wanted to take just a moment to say something about the themes that I addressed in my annual letter to the community this year, which I wove around the the history of Oswald Veblen in Princeton, and I just met someone who's Veblen's biographer. So I'm going to be really careful about what I say now about him. But I had not known as much as I should have, I would say, about him, but he's really somebody who is extraordinary to me, the way he affected the history of the university, the institute, and the town in ways that I think all of us benefit from now. And I was particularly interested in some of the ways that he showed leadership back in the late 20s and early 30s that speak to issues that I think we are jointly concerned about today. One of the things that made a difference in the history of the university and the town, I would say, were his early efforts to help refugees coming out of Europe that brought people like Thomas Mann and Albert Einstein and Eugene Wigner to Princeton. And he brought them here at a time when the university certainly was not as welcoming of diversity as it should have been at that time, when I think this town was less inclusive than it is today, but helped to start us on a trajectory toward the sorts of commitments that I think we share around this table. And the extraordinary things that he did then were reminders to me, I think, of the importance of these kinds of themes to what Princeton University and the town of Princeton are today. One of the things that I appreciate about this council's leadership and your leadership, Liz, is that you've continued to set a tone of inclusivity for the town, of a tone that is welcoming to immigrants and creating an atmosphere that allows people from all backgrounds to thrive and flourish. And that's something that's important for us as we go forward. As I think you know, we were down in Washington in November, where along with one of our very brave recent graduates, Maria Perales Sanchez, graduated a couple of years ago. We're suing the government, and so far successfully, in order to retain the protections of the DACA program. But high on my priority list are not only the protections in that program, but also other kinds of protections that are important for immigrant populations in this town and at the university. And we look forward to continuing to work on behalf of those, together on behalf of those kinds of inclusivity issues. I also thought Veblen was very important because he had helped to create what was the original Fine Hall, what we now call Jones Hall, on the Princeton campus, a construction project that eventually housed, I think quite literally, the greatest gathering of mathematicians and physicists that the world had at that time, maybe that the world had seen, and that building made it possible. That's important now because we're about to embark on a construction program at Princeton that I know is of interest and important to the town as well as to the university. And as I've said in my town halls on campus, I think just as what he did enabled us to put together communities of people that would not otherwise exist. I expect that to happen too from the projects we're undertaking now, including, for example, the reconstruction of the Princeton University Art Museum with what is a really fascinating concept from Sir David Adjaye in a way that I think will contribute both to the town and to the university. So with those observations, I'll stop, and I'm happy to take questions. Yes,
not so much questions, I'd say comments. This is my third opportunity to have a conversation with you, and it's a very unique opportunity for me to say to you that I really, truly appreciate that collaboration that we have. Since I moved here about 20 years ago, and when I decided to make Princeton my home, that it was going to be my home, what's been most important for me from that day forward is building community. And Princeton, in my opinion, and I think others share it, is that we would not be the same without the university. But at the same time, the university would be a different experience for the students and for the faculty if Princeton was not the vibrant and welcoming community that it is. And there's much that we have done together in collaboration, and there's still much more that we can do. And there's many opportunities. I know Ms. Applegate here serves on Princeton's Complete Count Committee. It's something for the census, upcoming census. And that's just one example of the many opportunities that we have to work together to ensure that ours is stronger. As you know, and it is working together that we can make ours continue to make it a welcoming and vibrant community. I personally know Maria Perales, and so I truly appreciate that the university has been vocal and standing the values, that we share the same values, and that you're very vocal, the university is very vocal about standing up for that and defending our values. So my main, I'd like to say, is a comment, not a question, but I truly appreciate what we've been able to accomplish together, but also point out, remind everyone that there's a lot more that we can do, and I look forward to other opportunities for us to collaborate together.
Well, I appreciate that, and as you can imagine, we're in fervent agreement about everything that you've said. We really recognize that when we're bringing either undergraduate students or graduate students or faculty members to the university, we want to bring them to a community, and that community is both the university community and the town community and parts of the surrounding region as well. And it really matters that the town is such a welcoming place for our students and faculty from a very wide variety of backgrounds, and finding projects creatively where we can collaborate makes that all the stronger. So I appreciate what the town has done already. I look forward to discussing those other opportunities and finding ways to seize them. I do also, at the table, want to thank Chief Sutter for his work to help make that cooperation smooth, which makes a huge difference for us at the university on a whole number of different issues.
So I want to thank you for making, I spent the last couple of years working on the steering committee for the Climate Action Plan. And I had the privilege of working with Shane Weber, who was also on the steering committee, and I'm really grateful for the forward-thinking and really aggressive policies the university has put in place for making your own campus ready for the future and sustainable. And I guess in the same spirit of cooperation, I would like to hope that we can rely on you for assistance in helping the town to implement actions from the Climate Action Plan that we need to do to measure up as well and to move into the future. Some examples, things like stormwater management. We realize from a resiliency standpoint, we have to get more aggressive about making sure that we know how to handle the rain, the increasing amounts of rain that are going to be falling on our town. Transportation is obviously something we'd like to work on together, transit. We've been in conversations a little bit with Alan Kornhauser, one of your illustrious faculty members who does work on autonomous vehicles, and he actually brought, at sort of the 11th hour, an opportunity for us to possibly get involved with a federally funded pilot for that. We weren't able to pull our act together in time for that particular one, but I hope that we'll be able to do that going forward and work with the university to make that work. And you know, I know there are going to be many, many opportunities, so I hope that you'll agree that we should be working on those kinds of issues together.
Yeah, I think sustainability is a real area of opportunity for joint activity on some of these things, particularly around mass transportation, trying to figure out what the creative solutions are that can work is something where the town and the university working together are much more powerful than if we're doing it separately. You know, I think the specifics always have to be worked out, right? And but from my standpoint, you know, everything you've said is the sort of thing that we want to be investigating and exploring and figuring out how to tackle on this theme of things that we can do as a kind of a joint community, I think it's the responsibility of communities like this one, by which I mean the town and the university together, to model some of the things that can really be done to create a sustainable future where all of us can thrive. So I think those things are very much worth talking about. They're also very hard, obviously. You know, I've been hearing about autonomous vehicles now for a fair period of time, and I don't know what to make of them. There was, a very interesting study that was published a couple of weeks ago around the effects of Uber in towns where it existed, where a lot of the Uber vehicles circulate unoccupied much of the time, and people all of a sudden start taking those instead of taking mass transit or instead of walking short distances. So I never cease to be amazed at how much a solution that looks good all of a sudden turns out to have kind of unpredictable collateral consequences. But having said that, it is clear that we need to find ways to be able to do the things we do and do them in a more sustainable fashion with a smaller carbon footprint. And it's equally clear to me that on all the kinds of topics from, as you say, stormwater management to the sustainability of our heating systems to transportation, we need to be working together around that in order to make progress. So those are places where I think creative solutions are possible, and we just need to work together to find out what are the details that succeed.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the stormwater issue in particular, but first I want to thank you both personally and on behalf of the community. I think again, as Leticia said, for your leadership on behalf of the Dreamers and on behalf of immigrant communities. And also for, as David said, there's not going to be any new ground to cover, so for your cooperation with the Climate Action Plan, and some of the people at the university really participated in that, both officially and unofficially. So, but I'm gonna push you a little bit on the stormwater, because I was reviewing the sustainability plan, and while the university is anticipating the amount of stormwater, increasing the amount of stormwater it's going to manage, it still leaves vast amounts of university acreage unmanaged. And I think this is, along with many climate issues, but I think flooding is really going to be the climate issue that's going to affect Princeton. And so I wonder, what resources can be brought to bear at the university and in the town to work together. And I know this is, I'm not asking you to be an expert on this, to make this just a really high level of commitment, because even downtown in the last couple of years, Heinz Plaza has flooded. I had the experience of being downtown, I think it was last year, and walking over to the library with water up to my knees, and this is just going to be one of the first things that, this is going to continue. And on the campus, if you're building a new campus and taking land that is now permeable and putting additional pavement that's not porous in their buildings and everything, that's going to affect the whole community. So I'm wondering what kind of level of commitment the university has to making sure that whatever you do doesn't make the situation worse for the town or for the rest of the university community, talking about unintended consequences.
I appreciate the question and the importance of the topic. I was telling a couple of my colleagues that I was tempted to walk over here this evening without a coat, which is on the one hand very pleasant for a February evening, but also a little disconcerting as you talk about some of these challenges going forward. Our commitment on managing stormwater sustainably is a very strong commitment. As you anticipated, Eve, it's a little beyond my competence levels or expertise. In fact, it's significantly beyond my competence levels or expertise to get into a discussion of the details about that. I don't know whether or not the particular concerns you mentioned are ones that you've already had a chance to talk to our team about. I know both that our facilities department, Trevi Williams as executive vice president, Q Wong as our vice president for facilities, to Shauna Weber, are very committed to doing these projects in a sustainable fashion. you say, it affects us directly, it affects the town, and issues like this one are ones where I want us to have a very strong commitment to doing that in the way that we've said we'll do it. Now again, beyond that, I don't know whether there's some detailed issue here that I'm not aware of, but if there are concerns about where we are on that, I think we should continue to have those conversations and understand that a bit better. Yeah.
Just to follow on, I wanted to just know, your viewpoint in terms of, we're about to really undergo a big growth in terms of the housing that's going to be developed because of our community house and settlement. And also the impact of the lake campus and oh, sorry. See, I need
can
the
give you a
microphone.
microphone.
That's okay, I forgot.
Okay, yeah.
It's hard because I want you to hear me, but in terms of the lake campus and the impact that that's going to have too on housing and infrastructure, what are your views in terms of how we're going to work together to solve these problems? We talked about stormwater, we talked a little bit about transit. How are we going to meet the needs for housing and the workforce housing, the staff, as well as the faculty that will, of course, want to live here in Princeton? And what the impact is also going to be really, I think in a very positive sense, to commerce and what we have in terms of office space availability and retail, restaurants, and so on. But housing in general as well. So I was just interested to know your view. I mean, I've seen, of course, Kristen has been great about making sure that we're invited to the campus mobility plan, to see what's happening with the lake campus. And so we become informed, and the public becomes informed of what's happening. But I was curious to see, how do you see us going forward? I know the university is great about having 5, 10, 20-year plans, and I think the town's plan also needs to mirror where the university is going.
Well, I think I very much agree that we need to be in partnership with one another. We have appreciated the town's input as we have gone through our planning processes and as we develop the current campus plan, which, as you say, is a 10-year campus plan looking at a kind of a 30-year window to go with it. Obviously, a lot's going to happen in 30 years that we can't anticipate. Things will change, but it gives us some sense of what the possibilities are. We have tried to be open about that, receiving input and taking that into account, and appreciate having a chance to be involved as the town plans as well, and recognize the importance of those conversations taking place. So as you say, that we're coordinated and that we can, go back to the question earlier from David, find opportunities to coordinate around things like transportation that admit of those sorts of things. With regard to the lake campus, which is over on the West Windsor side of the lake, I would think what we're doing with graduate housing over there would be beneficial from the town's standpoint. It has been a very high priority for our graduate students who often find it difficult to afford rental housing in town, to have housing that's proximate to the university. This does require you to cross a bridge, but particularly on a nice evening like the one we have right now, it's actually a pretty short walk to get from the other side of Lake Carnegie over to Princeton. So my hope would be that at least, given where it's located in terms of traffic patterns and proximity and our ability to construct kinds of housing that are not otherwise readily available, would actually assist with some of these issues. But it is 100% important that we be in continuing conversation about the topics.
I guess to Michelle's point, so I'm new to the council,
You want this?
am I the only one? Loudly enough.
I'm sorry.
A big part of my campaign was talking about planning, and I cited Mayor Joe Riley, who came and talked with us last year, and his emphasis on the people who come 50 years, the residents of our town 50 years from now will wonder why we built what we did and where, and are the things that we're planning, do they stand the test of time? And I think some of us have families who've been in Princeton for a very long time, and we feel very committed to the long-term vision of Princeton. And so I'm wondering how you would envision this planning process. I feel that it's so important that the university and the town and the schools and all the major stakeholders coordinate very closely during this period of growth on all these areas that we've talked about tonight: sustainability, transit, equity, and I had envisioned a process sort of like the Climate Action Plan. I thought that would brought in all the major stakeholders in a very sort of groundbreakingly collaborative way. And I just was wondering if you wanted to speak to what your vision might be of how we could collaborate most productively in this sort of the big picture long-term planning.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I can answer that in a particularly specific way, except to say that
It's a broad question.
yeah, well, I'm very appreciative of the kind of open channels of communication that, as I said in my opening remarks, and as the mayor said in hers, I actually think this council has worked to build over a multi-year period right now. We've been through all sorts of planning processes on the university campus. I think what's more important than the particular details of the process is that kind of commitment to openness and to listening to one another and to trying to figure out, as you say, how to make decisions that carry forward the values of these communities in ways that will stand the test of time. I ran a very complicated strategic planning process on the university campus, which on the one hand, I'm happy with the outcomes that it produced and what we learned out of it. I'm not sure I would recommend it to anybody as a model. It's a tremendous amount of work, but I think going into it with the sense that we do need to be in partnership with one another, and with the recognition that, as you say, decisions that get made now are going to affect people for a very long period of time, and then the humility to recognize that we can't anticipate all the things that would change, right? If you're looking, I think you said 50 years in your comments, right? 50 years forward, the decisions today. Which I agree with, but if you look 50 years back, right, and we're thinking about 1970 or so, right, and how much society has changed since then, and what sorts of things we couldn't possibly have imagined. It's a difficult process to do. You do it better if you're asking the questions and at least recognizing that these things are important to us. So,
I was here in 1970. I was at community park school at that time. I think that a lot in the town is exactly the same way that it was then, and so I think it's my personal opinion that we need to do a major strategic sort of forward-thinking plan along the lines, maybe not quite so arduous as the one that, but I take that plan as a model. I think we need that, and I hope that we can build on that model and also continue to do it in partnership, because we do share a confined space.
yeah, I agree. I meant only to say that I can't comment on what exactly is the best process, but like you, I think these long-term planning processes are hugely beneficial, because they do help you to see the choices that you can make now, and to get some sense of what the various consequences for those choices might be. I wasn't here in 1970. I arrived 9 years later as an undergraduate freshman, and it is true, lots of things have changed about the town. A lot of things have stayed the same about the town. I was very happy to be here in Princeton at the time. I feel like it's an even better place to be a resident, as well as a better home for the university than it was before. But I agree 100% again with you that as we look forward, we want to be thinking about those choices mindfully. Things get more complicated, right, as we grow.
Well, I guess I'll take the mic. I'm
You
usually
don't
loud
need
anyway.
it.
I enjoy it.
Mia's mention of looking at Princeton 50 years from now is a good segue into the comment. Mine is a hybrid comment question, as they usually are. But Mia talked about things not changing so much, but one thing that has changed, and not for the better, has been the decline of the African American population in Princeton. We see that particularly like in the Whispering-Jackson neighborhood that once was where African American Princetonians were relegated during segregation, but nevertheless still became a place with a very rich, vibrant history. So I guess the comment part is I would love to see the town and the university invest more of its, not limitless, but ample resources into investigating the reasons for this decline. We know a lot of it has to do with affordability. Just speaking from some people who have left, some of it is just losing a sense of belonging. And we know we call ourselves a welcoming community, and know we all endeavor to be such. But speaking to a lot of folks who are still in, like African Americans who are still in the Whispering-Jackson neighborhood, and outside of there, when we think about Princeton 50 years from now, a lot of folks do get concerned about what that African American population is going to look like, and whether there would be a significant African American population. So I guess the comment and the question, I guess, is sort of in there somewhere, is I would love to see us being the town and the university using our ample, not just, let's say, our financial resources, but our human resources. We have wonderful professors who study these types of things to figure out possible solutions to keep our African American population here.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate the question, Wayne, because again, for us, one of the things that makes this community such a kind of a welcoming place for our students and faculty as they come in is that I do think this community and its leadership share our commitment to diversity, and that's something that that we as a university value and that our populations value. I have less expertise, even though I have lived in this community for a fair part of my lifetime now, about exactly what's happened in town. I will tell you, as I look at the diversity of our university since the time I came here as a student in the late 70s and early 80s, one of the things that strikes me about the university is that it has become more diverse. It's become more diverse in ways that are multicultural. I would say we've had significant growth, for example, in our Asian American population, which was very small at the time that I was a student, and so one gets ups and downs in the numbers of various groups within the population. And I at least find it helpful to think about diversity within the university community in kind of this multi-group character. And I would hope that we could do that as well with regard to the town. With that said, I think there would be both students and faculty who might be interested in this. You mentioned faculty in particular. A number of our students, we have a set of extraordinarily talented students who care about connections to the community, care about the kinds of issues of community diversity that you are raising, and are looking for senior thesis topics every year. And they're, this kind of an issue for them is something to dive into and do work on. So I think there are a number of different ways that one could explore that. And I will just close by saying it's very important for me that this town remains diverse and that it continues to have a strong African American community, along with a broad range of other communities, and that we all feel strength in the variety of people who surround us.
Sure, absolutely.
I wanted to shift gears just a bit and talk about public safety. So I know you're aware that our fire department has gone through a major transition over the past few weeks to move to a combination volunteer paid department, and we're appreciative of the university's partnership in that, especially appreciative of the efforts of the university to help with the volunteer ranks. It's been a very successful program. The council held a meeting for the first time on campus last spring at the invitation of students. And one of the big topics that came up there were issues over Title IX And I was wondering if you could speak to that, because it is, and sexual assault on campus, because even though it's, in some ways it's a campus issue, I think in the community, I think there's a lot of concern about, students are members of our community too. We want people to be safe. We want people to feel like, especially victims, that they can go forward and get justice.
Well, obviously it's a very high priority for us to ensure that the campus is a safe place, and that all adjudications are fair, and that it's both the case that victims are able to get justice, and that we are doing everything we can to keep the rate of assaults as low as possible. As I think you probably know, Liz, these issues are not just campus issues. I don't know whether you've ever surveyed the age cohort in Princeton or the high school age cohort, but if you look at the Center for Disease Control statistics about sexual assault in the United States, the rates are disturbingly high on college campuses, but even higher off of them, right? And the rates are disturbingly high in general. This is not a statement, right, about the local community here. I don't know the numbers for the local community here, but if you look at high school numbers in general, they are very worrisome numbers in the same kind of range. So I think this is something that all of us should be concerned about. And first and foremost, our responsibility should be to think about what's happening not only on campuses, but in our communities and in our country if we've got these kinds of statistics for sexual misconduct and sexual assault across such a wide number of people. We work at the university both around training and education and bystander education. We're working with the students to take responsibility around these issues. But if you get to the point where you've got an adjudication around a complaint, you want that adjudication to be fair. You want offenders to be held accountable, but that doesn't undo the harms that have been done. So it's a high priority for us to continue to do what we can to improve the circumstances on the campus and the procedures. I actually think we've now had 2 external reviews looking at this, that we do a good job with regard to those procedures. It's a very difficult position to be in, to be the adjudicator in a case and to have to look at a set of circumstances where you've got, in most of these instances, 2 different people claiming and believing that they're telling the truth about an episode to which there were no witnesses. So we look for ways to improve that. It may be more difficult depending on what comes down from the Department of Education in the near future. I think one of the things that anybody who's had to deal with these kinds of issues will say that they're hard to begin with. They require the buy-in of your community. If you're going to be successful around them, you need people to believe in the processes, and that means they have to come out of the community. They get even harder if you get to a set of circumstances where you have a lot of fine-grained governmental regulation coming down, and if it's going in multiple directions, which is what we've seen recently.
Right. Yeah, I know the students who came to us were very interested in exploring restorative justice as one of the ways of addressing this, and I know they're working on some of those issues at the school district. I mean, it's a little beyond, I think, our purview here, but I think it is like another area that could be ripe for university engagement in the community. And I think you're right. I mean, it's not just a problem that's on campus, but is there a way to use the challenge facing the university and have some of those things be brought into the high school or brought into our other schools here to try to work on this, because it's clearly not a problem that's just a Princeton problem, but it is something that we are trying to grapple with, and if there's a way to combine resources and try to address it in a creative way, because clearly it seems like what has been going on for the past several decades isn't really working to solve the problem.
Yeah. So our student faculty committees and our administrators are exploring potential restorative justice processes that could stand as an alternative to more formal disciplinary processes. I think any solution of that kind, if it's a solution, has to be approached carefully and has to be approached within, again, the understandings of a particular community. When the Obama administration came out with its Dear Colleague letter a few years ago that led to the current set of procedures, one of the things they were concerned about were informal procedures like restorative justice procedures, which they felt at the time did not hold offenders sufficiently accountable. And so they put pressure to move in a different direction. I think one of the difficulties with any set of procedures like that is ex post, looking on the set of procedures. Any set of individuals can be unhappy with the outcomes that emerge from them, and one can second guess the set of procedures themselves. I think these, as I said a moment ago, I think these problems are difficult enough that I can't tell you that we have solutions on the university campus which I can happily offer to other jurisdictions or institutions, and I think any successful solution, to the extent that one can be found, really has to be coming out of the community that owns it and authors it. So we will continue to work on it. I do actually think that this particular problem is within the purview in the town of this body, and that all of us have responsibilities around these issues, right? I'm not aware of institutions that have come up with a fully satisfactory solution to this set of issues. As I said, it's a very durable problem and a very difficult one to solve.
Right.
I do have just, not something I was planning on asking, but I'll throw it in since we have a few minutes left. I think Princeton is a unique, I want to know about unique, because I don't have enough experience, but unusual in terms of its relations between like the students, the campus and the town. I think the university is much more self-contained. Princeton's never felt to me like a college town, the way that other places that have large universities in them. I think because between the residential living, colleges, and the eating clubs and everything, it's a very self-contained campus. And I know students go out into the community in all sets of circumstances, community action, outdoor action at the beginning of the year. And I think the Pace Center does a really great job of reaching out into the community. But I guess a little bit on channeling Tim Quinn, who talked last year about, inviting the university across Nassau Street. And I guess, and maybe transportation has something to do with this as well, but I'd love to see the undergraduates more engaged in the town, like not only on Nassau Street, but beyond. And I guess I'm wondering if you have any, does this feel to you like a typical college town, or I don't think it's just me that perceives that there's that separation, and maybe it was intended at some point, but I'm rambling a little bit. But I'm just wondering what you see as other avenues that we can do, or the university can do, to kind of encourage students, both undergraduates and graduates, to get more involved in the town in terms of programs, volunteering, etc.
Well, I think there are opportunities there to be seized. This goes back to Letitia's, I think, early comment about there being greater opportunities for collaboration. I feel that's true. I think more of our undergraduates are finding reasons to cross Nassau Street and get engaged with the town. And I think, just to, again, channel a theme that Tim Quinn had mentioned last year, I think the town has been more embracing of undergraduates coming across the street as well. So I think that's something we should continue to look for ways to leverage. things like art at Bainbridge House. It's a small example, but it's a way of breaking down some of these boundaries. And I do appreciate there are some students who cross Nassau Street but don't get much further than crossing Nassau Street. And occasionally I'll talk to some of them about this, you know, how many blocks do you go? And it's pretty rare for them to get more than about 2 blocks. But there are more and more who are interested in, and who, I think, because of very positive things that are happening in the town of Princeton, are realizing that there are benefits from greater interaction. So I think just looking for ways to do that, and I don't have any immediate suggestions about what to do, except to say that I think that the welcoming attitude that we are feeling from the town in that regard, and the welcoming message being sent by this council and the town's leadership are very important to facilitating those kinds of interactions. One of the things I just say that connects to a lot of what we've said here, including Dwayne's question earlier, is that we have a number of academic enterprises right now and academic projects where, partly because we as a university want this to happen, and partly because students want it to happen, there is a connection between service initiatives and community-based learning and the scholarly work of the university. And more students are seeing that as an opportunity and something that they think is important about their time here. So I think we've got opportunities to do that. On the question of whether it's a typical college town or not, right? You know, we're not Madison, Wisconsin, which has a giant university, and as does Austin, Texas. I think we're a great college town. I think we're distinctively a college town. That is, this is a place where the interaction between the town and the university is, at least to my lights, as you know, an alumnus faculty member, currently president, and also resident of the town of Princeton. It's part of what makes this place special. So I wouldn't claim to be typical, but I wouldn't claim we can claim to be a special college town. And I don't think you miss that in the town, but getting some more of that engagement, that would be good.
If I can follow up on that, actually, not long ago, I had a conversation with a group of university students who were shocked to learn that we have, in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, there's a historical tour they were so very interested in hearing about that, and they were wanting to follow up and take the tour. So I don't know if it's because I'm on the mailing list, but I'm very aware of what's going on at the university, and I wonder if the students are aware of what's going on in the community, of events or community events or historical tours that they could take part in. That if there's a way that we can make that same connection that we have, the opportunity to learn what's going on at the university, for the students to be able to become aware of what's going on further down, the other side of Nassau Street.
Yeah, I think finding ways to communicate is both very important and kind of can have quite an impact, and also in some ways is quite difficult around these things, right? So when you talk about what the students know and what they don't, it's hard to generalize about our student body. I think some are quite aware. I think the Princeton and Slavery Project a few years ago, among its other benefits, helped to raise student awareness of the town as they told these stories about things that were about Princeton University and slavery. They were also talking about the town of Princeton and slavery, and began, I think, to appreciate some of those connections more deeply than they had before. And there are a number for whom those kinds of things are very interesting. If we can find ways to get the information to them, I think that's a great idea. And I just, Brent Colburn, who heads up not only our government affairs office, but our communications office, and Ben Chang are both here, and I'm sure we'll think about that. I will say, getting our students, right, our students can tell us whatever information we push out to them, right? That they are so busy that they still didn't see whatever announcement it was that we had sent. So I can't make any promises about it, but I think looking for ways to at least integrate those calendars in some way, so that if students want to know something, they can. We should, yeah.
Or even if we can involve them, like every year we do culture sharing. We started an event, culture sharing evening, in the community. If we can involve the students to join us and share.
That sounds
our
like a great
culture.
idea. That sounds like a great idea. I think there would be real enthusiasm around that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I actually came here wanting to talk about Oswald Veblen, and you started out. So in case the audience hadn't heard, I want to just quote your own words. And you, well, first of all, I've been so glad to see the role that the university has taken in the situation with DACA students. And so you talk about Veblen's humanitarian courage and demonstrated through his early efforts to aid the careers of brilliant women and African-American mathematicians, and his critical role in rescuing Jewish scholars from persecution in Europe. He worked with the Emergency Committee in aid of displaced German scholars to accommodate refugees at Princeton. The scholars whom Veblen helped bring to Princeton included professors of mathematics, physics, economics, and art history. So I wanted to let you know that we have a group called the Friends of Harrington Woods, and they are, some of them are in our audience, and they are working to restore the house where Oswald Veblen lived with his wife, Elizabeth. And they anticipate, they're working with the town, and they want this to be a community center devoted to fostering those very ideals that Veblen worked so hard to bring to Princeton. I just wanted to read one more thing, and you said Oswald Veblen understood that people are the heart and soul of a great university, and I would say of a town as well. And he also understood that thoughtfully designed buildings can stimulate the collaborations, activity, insights, and friendships that animate a scholarly community. And that's exactly what the Friends of Harrington Woods want to do with this building. And so I would just like to invite you to come and meet and see the house. It's been boarded up for a long time, but the Friends of Harrington Woods would love to give you a tour of the house, and I think it would be very meaningful for you. And they want to thank you for including this tribute to Veblen in your recent remarks.
Well, I appreciate that. The Friends were kind enough, they were having an event which I wasn't able to attend that they invited me to, but I'm happy to accept this invitation. We'll find a way to get it on my calendar, and I look forward to learning a bit more about his history. As your accurate quotation says, I do think he made a difference here, and I'm happy to see that legacy preserved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, unless anybody has like a final comment, I just wanted to thank Chris for coming out again. These conversations I think are always really useful, and it's a nice opportunity for us to talk like semi-informally, formally with each other. And I thought there were some interesting ideas that came up around potential academic collaborations, so hopefully folks were taking notes on those. And I think there's a sense from all of us that we're at this almost inflection point, both for the university and for the town. And that, I mean, thinking about the next 50 years, I think there are going to be a lot of changes, both on campus and in the community, that are going to have a big impact. So, you know, it's an exciting time, and it's an important time, and it's also, I think we all feel that weight on our shoulders that we want to get it right, because it is going to have an impact, at least for the next 50 years, if not more. So we want to get it right. And having that collaboration with the university, I mean, we all feel so lucky that the university is here and that we have those resources and just the brilliant minds in our community that come here because of the university to help us as we plan for the future.
Yeah, well, I very much appreciate that. And one word that has recurred over and over again in what you just said and all of the council members have said is community. I think it is a perfect word to capture the things that we share. And as I began in thanking you for your leadership as mayor, it has been hugely helpful to have these conversations where whether it's informal or not with the microphone and everything else and the Pledge of Allegiance. It certainly is very helpful to be able to discuss the values that unite us and the projects that might benefit us both. We're going to have things that we disagree about, obviously, within that, but being able to do that in a way that recognizes the shared community amongst us is really important. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So we're going to take, I think, probably like a 10-minute break, and then we'll resume our regular council meeting. So again, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good to see you.
Thank you.
I was gonna
So we
say
don't have
that
to
for
leave,
Mr.
it's like the
Chair.
chair for leisure. Great, thank you. We're almost ready, it's just gonna be another couple minutes. Sorry for the delay here. Everyone's so quiet, you guys are very well behaved.
Do we get cookies? Maybe the next one.
We're recording again. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. And we're going to start with the approval of the minutes. And why don't we start with the December minutes of the meetings for December 4th, December 9th, December 16th, 18th, and do those in a block. So is there a motion to approve?
I would so move.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Fraga. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and now we'll take the 2020 minutes in a block. So for January 2nd, 11th, and 13th, are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? Or is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Sachs. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those minutes passed unanimously as well, and now we come to announcements, and everybody's sitting on different sides than they normally are, and different, I'm like getting a little disoriented, so we'll start with Mr. Williamson.
Oh, sure. I have a one announcement. Let me get back to my plan of action here. I apologize, I just have to look at something. I wasn't planning to go first, but. Corner House is hosting Springtime on Broadway, honoring Leah McDonald, and the Princeton Police Department will be in addition to Leah McDonald, the Princeton Police Department will be the first honoree of the James Floyd Community Partner Award. So it's scheduled for Friday, March 27th, 2020 at Chauncey Center at 1 Chauncey Road, starting at 6:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. And of course, you can find tickets online. You can visit cornerhousenj.org.
Is that any announcements?
One quick one, Princeton Human Services asked me to announce that they are now recruiting for 2 summer youth employment coordinators for the summer youth employment program, and the application and additional information can be found online.
And I will just announce, because I'm particularly excited about it, is that the first meeting of the newly reconstituted Flood and Stormwater Mitigation Commission will be held this Thursday a.m. at 8:30 in Room A in Witherspoon Hall, and welcome anybody from the public who'd like to be part of this. We'll be tackling a lot of the issues that we spoke about here tonight, as well as, flooding and stormwater mitigation throughout the town.
Okay. I have a few announcements. The first is, as many of you probably all heard today, or if you haven't, Superintendent Steve Cochran announced that he's going to be retiring at the end of this year. And just on behalf of the municipality, we want to thank Steve for being a really tremendous superintendent for our schools, and also being a terrific partner for the municipality through the years, and we're really going to miss him. This Friday, I'll be holding my monthly Meet the Mayor hours at the Princeton Public Library on February 29th from 8:30 to 10 a.m. And then immediately following that, there's going to be Coffee with a Cop at Bagel Nook, thank you, which has crazy bagels. So if you, even just to check out the crazy bagels, but you get to visit with our great police officers also, and that's going to be February 29th from 10 to noon. And are there any staff announcements? Staff announcements? Okay. Did I say, is the 28th the Friday? Okay, take that, it's not the 29th, it's the 28th. Friday the 28th? I did my math wrong. I'll be in the library, and also February 28th is Coffee with a Cop. Thank you. Keeps me honest. Okay, and now we'll move on to the proclamation for this evening. Is there anybody from the Women in Municipal Government Committee who is here to collect this? All right, if not, I'll just summarize the proclamation and we'll make sure it gets to them. So this is in honor of the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, and the Women in Municipal Government Committee is asking all the municipalities to pass these proclamations. Okay, and before we get to tonight's presentation, I wanted to see if we could amend the agenda to quickly talk about Resolution 20112, which is actually an item on our consent agenda. It's number 11. It's a resolution authorizing special event for global impact reduction for the New York City to Philadelphia Ride Charity Bike Ride. We have some folks here from far away, and they're probably not interested in the rest of our meeting. So if there's a motion to amend the agenda, to take that up next, and then hopefully to do it quite quickly.
I motion to amend the agenda.
Okay, moved by Ms. Niedergang and seconded by Mr. Cohen. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we will take up 20112, resolution authorizing special event for global impact reduction for the New York City to Philadelphia Ride Charity Bike Ride. And I know they've been working with Lieutenant Maurer. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this, or if there's a motion to approve.
I will move.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any questions or discussion?
I think we may have heard about this already, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows what this is, because it's a really great event for our town. We could have up to, I don't know if it's increased from 250 to 500 or?
Yes.
Yeah, so 500 bicycle riders are going to be riding from New York City to Philadelphia as a fundraiser for East Coast Greenway, and they're going to be stopping overnight in Princeton. So we've been talking about ways to partner with organizations in town to really take advantage of their presence. We've been talking about ways to direct them to our merchants to stimulate the local economy. So I just wanted everyone to know what it is that we're voting on. I think it's fantastic. Mid-May.
May 16th to 17th.
May 16th to 17th, great.
Perhaps we can bring it up our economic development committee.
Yeah, we get to put on the agenda. And I know the town, in collaboration with some of our partners, invested in some temporary event bike racks. So if those would be useful, we could probably haul them out for when you guys are in town too. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously, and
Thank
look
you
forward to seeing you back again in May.
Yeah,
Hopefully the weather's good for you.
doing something so great, but can't wait for it.
Great.
Okay, so now we'll go back to our regularly scheduled agenda, and next is a presentation, and I'd like to invite Mr. John Bailey to talk about a community art project for Mary Moss Playground.
Trying to figure where we could put it where mayor and council can see it and also the public can see
You
the
have to put it a
camera.
little bit more towards us.
I just want to get it situated. Yeah. This is very thin pipes. Okay. May I sit?
Sure.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come before council. Before I get into my remarks, whoever it is that is recognizing the police department, the Jim Floyd Community Service Award, good choice. As you know, I'm a firm believer in good public safety, having been the former national director of Weed and Seed, anti-gang, anti-drugs around the country. To be able to see someone recognize Nick Sutter and the work that the officers are doing here is very important. Secondly, let me thank you. As you know, this is the last Monday of Black History Month, so I'm feeling myself a little bit, only because I'm feeling good about being an African American this month. Every month should be Black History Month, every month should be American History Month, but that's not the way it is. Back in, I mentioned this on Saturday, so I'll mention it again. The United Nations in 2015 proclaimed the 10 years, 2015 to 2024, as the decade for the study of people of African descent. U.S. Congress passed a resolution 2 years ago to study slavery in this country. The Princeton Council on April 11th, 2015, I believe, passed the resolution making Elizabeth Jackson the 20th Historic District. I say all this to say that for those of you who don't know my background, having been the former director of the Princeton Youth Center, which is now the Arts Council of Princeton, along with Ben Wright, helped change on the death of Paul Robeson, helped change Avalon Place to Paul Robeson Place. Have been doing programs in the community for a number of years, come here on my dime and sometimes your dime, to make sure that this community is uplifted and recognized with the equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective that is value added to the town. Back in September, after being here doing our Join Effort project, spoke to a number of folks about a couple of things. One, there had been some complaint about the mural on John and Lytle, and that
there needs to be something black done. My response is that I'm not responding to that. I will continue to build on the 20th Historic District work that we as a community have been dealing with. I think that if that mural there was something that the community wanted to see, then we should be supportive, and I was supportive of that. I then reached out in September to a number of folks to talk about a mural at the Mary Moss Playground. I got a number of pieces of information. One, we think it's something that needs to be done. Two, we probably need to figure out how we engage the community so that we don't make the same mistake that some other folks have made. Three, that at some point we need to raise some dollars to take a look at how we pay for this. And so what I did was took a lead convener's role after talking to these other folks and reached out to almost 200 former and current residents to get them involved in the process and asked them a couple things. One, would you be supportive of this? Two, can we use your name? And three, would you serve on an honorary organizing committee to be kept informed of what was going on through the process? Not one person said no. As the process started to evolve, if you look at the schedule, there's a series of statements, and after each statement, there's a date. And the dates sort of reflect how we should be moving to the process. This week, and while I'm here in February, is fact-finding. Trying to get all of the information that I need to be able to go back to the community, go back to the consulting group and say, okay, this is what I found out. Now, some of the stuff I knew because I had been engaged, the mayor in the conversation back in January, and she gave me some things and some suggestions that, and some steps that one would take in terms of being able to take this process and move it forward. And so I'm doing those things, and the fact-finding is one of those. And one of the things she said would be good to do is bring a concept so that we get an idea of what you're talking about. So the concept is basically uplifting the community. But in the document, it talks about themes, be it themes with the churches, themes with the streets, which represent the community, themes with African-American men, African-American women, educators, folks who have played a role in this community. And I suggested to the artists, these are the things, these are some of the things that I've got from talking to folks. Take that and then give us something that we can look at and take forward for discussion. This is what he came up with. This is not the only thing we're going to deal with. This is just the first thing he came up with. And hopefully, from the fact-finding, I'll share with him that there probably needs to be another option or two for us to consider. And so, rather than getting caught up in, because initially in the conversation, well, what about my mother? What about my aunt? What about my brother? What about my family? And when you start talking to 200 or 300 people, that's now 600 to 900 people. And so what made sense was to do something that showed inclusiveness of all of the families, and everybody went to the churches, to show inclusiveness of the community, and everybody lived on one of those streets. So in essence, we were moving forward with trying to come up with something that we can then take back to the community saying, okay, these are the ideas that we've collected, these are the thoughts that people have put forward, and now we have a couple options. We even have identified some money, and we've identified, in addition to that, a couple of sites in the park, if we get that far, that might be useful. One down as you go down the steps, the other where they house the watering sprinkler system. So, still in the midst of fact-finding, this is the last meeting. I had a great conversation with Historic Preservation this afternoon. Matter of fact, a very interesting conversation, because what I got from them was, even though Julie and a couple other folks spoke, they all thought this was great. I shared a concern about church and state. They say, well, this is more history than it is religion. And so I said, yeah, but that issue was raised, and to be authentic, you got to raise that issue with everybody that you're talking to let them know that that issue was raised as part of the feedback and pushback that one got. I spoke, just so that you know, just didn't stop there. I reached out to the Dorothea House because the African American community was also, that community was shared with the Italian community. I reached out to Nick at the police department to talk about Mr. Harris, Mr. Lewis, Fred Porter, and other black men who had played significant roles here in the town. We've talked to the people down at the nursery school to see what they have relative to, one, being involved in the process, two, taking part in some type of ceremony, if in fact we got that far. So in terms of being authentic, in terms of the due diligence, in terms of not making this John Bailey's piece, but making this a community piece, and some folks have said, well, you're trying to ram this down people's throat. That's really an over-exaggeration. What I'm trying to do is lift up this community, put something forward, because the bus that had been talked about moved nowhere. The statue that had been talked about moved nowhere. But in doing the research on the bus, which was $90,000 anticipated, or the statue, which was $250,000 anticipated, then what made sense was to come up with something that was not as costly, but at the same time would be aesthetically sound and correct in an environment that was focused on kids, community, African American heritage. And so I come before you tonight sort of feeling good about Black History Month, feeling good about the effort that had been made thus far, but knowing that there's work that still needs to be done, knowing that there's a need to reach back to folks. But I think by going to community and collecting that group of names and bringing those folks forward suggests that I am standing on the shoulders not only of my ancestors, but I'm standing on the shoulders of people who care. I've gotten comments from, let me know what you're doing. Johnny Bailey, if you think it's the right thing to do, then we're supporting you. And so having that as an emphasis and an impetus to step forward, then that's what I've done. And I hope that it'll be received. I've gotten feedback in terms of additional steps that we may take. But more importantly, I think that we're moving. We've gotten I won't say unanimous consent, but I do think we have a consensus that we're moving in the right direction. And I'm a partner, but I'm not a silent partner. And so what I do is I engage. And I hope that y'all hear kind of what I'm saying and take it as a thoughtful presentation from someone who has spent his own money and his own time and cares about this community enough to do what I think is in its best interest. Sometimes you get the support, sometimes you don't. As I mentioned to Liz, no one gets 100% support, either in an elected office or for a project or for a program that they do. But what you try to do is by leadership, set an example that will inspire others to either hear your message or hope your message resonates with them so they can be supportive of what you're trying to do. I get no personal gratification out of this. What I do get is an opportunity to see my community continue to smile and continue to feel good about itself, because I'm losing churches, I'm losing the institutions. There are very few kids in the neighborhood anymore. Most of them live in not the Holly House, but live in the village or the circle. And so, in essence, that neighborhood, while the community had been relegated to be a Black community and a Hispanic community and an Italian community, is now more Anglo than anything. And so I'm not negating those folks. I'm just saying that, part of this upliftment is to be able to, 50 years from now, when I'm no longer here and Mia Sachs is the only one still alive on council, to be able to then know that we came by here, that we came this way, and that it has some meaning. So with that, I'm more than happy to take any questions, but I appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, we can have a little bit of discussion. I think that I'd asked John to come and just give us an update on where he was, because I know he's going to be in town this week and making presentations.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate, because I know you've been out meeting with different groups too, and I thought it was important for council to just be aware. I know you've received significant feedback from the community, especially the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. Well, I've been receiving significant feedback, and I know that the feedback I've gotten has been from people who've said they've spoken to you also. So, you know, this is a process, and I personally appreciate you spending the time and really trying to organize around this, because you know, there's a lot of support for public art, and we'd like to see something. I think all of us probably have some concern about the accelerated schedule here, because I think this still needs to be workshopped in the, especially in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. And there, I mean, I know you've heard some of the feedback too, so I don't know if you have to get into all the details now. I don't know if Dwayne, you wanted to, okay.
I was saying, going back to my comments to President Eisgruber earlier, you know, I get concerned about how the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood will be seen 25 years from now, and I think it's extremely important that we do place something permanent where the future generations will know the history of the neighborhood. The neighborhood is changing demographically changing very quickly, and if I look at it from a broader perspective, we'd like to think we're all good people and like to think that we'll trust that we'll keep rich histories present in, let's say, school curricula, etc. But we know in our nation we have not been doing that. We think about places like what was called Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, these African-American utopian communities, or Rosewood in Florida, which are not even mentioned in our history books anymore, right? And I'm afraid the same thing will happen in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood unless people like John do the great work which he's doing to do things to preserve that history. It's great that we've met with John before, and we did express what concerns were out there. I'm happy to see that John has mentioned his response to a lot of those concerns and is doing a great job of getting neighborhood feedback. So with that, I say that I just wanted to put on record that I support what John is doing. I know there's still some concerns out there, and but I am confident that John and those who are supporters of this project will do what's necessary to make sure the procedures are followed correctly, and John knows how to cross his T's and dot his I's, and that the end result will be something that we all would like to see.
And I just want to say a quick word that I'm personally really grateful, John. You know, I was at some of the meetings around the mural at John and Lee, and heard sentiment from the African American community that there needed to be something like this. And I thank you for stepping up, sort of filling in the void. We on council know what it's like to be told by the community somebody should do this or somebody should do that. But having somebody actually raise their hand and say, I'll do this or I'll do that is much rarer. So thank you for stepping up.
Anybody else? Okay, all right, well, thank you, and this is to be continued. Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, and I'd like to open up public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to something that's not already on the agenda? All right, seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to the December police report. Do you want to play? As well.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said last time, I am in the midst of putting together our 2019 annual report, but being that this was the December report at the end of the year, I thought I would just extract some of the traffic, because I know traffic is always a major complaint from the community and concern. So I just wanted to give you a picture that I'll go more into detail in our annual report. But just some facts that I took out that I want to be public and for Mayor and Council to be aware of. So in 2019, we saw a total decrease in motor vehicle crashes. This is the second consecutive year that we saw this decrease. In 18, we had 944. Previous year, I believe we had 1,001, and now we're down to 877. So that's promising news. What it means right now, we don't know, but this hopefully exhibits some of the results of some of the hard work that we're doing along with engineering and addressing some of the problem areas. With regard to pedestrians struck by vehicles, we did see a small decrease in 2019 from 2018, from 17 to 13. This represents the lowest number of pedestrian crashes since 2010, and that's combined that data obviously from the borough and township. With regard to pedestrians, and to talk about where we're doing some work in 2020, we did find a disturbing trend that 84% of the pedestrian crashes occurred at marked crosswalks at intersections where vehicles failed to yield. And we found that, I believe it's 89% of those accidents were due to turning movements, where a vehicle was making a left or a right turn at the intersection. So we have some really specific data there that we can kind of drill down on in 2020 from the enforcement, education, and maybe engineering perspective to try to get this even lower. That's pretty good data for us to use moving forward. We found bicyclists involved in motor vehicle accidents increased fairly significantly in 2019 from 7 to 19, 2018 to 2019. The average has been since 2013 about 13, the average is 13 a year, so we're even fairly significantly higher than the average. So this is a area we're going to be looking at in 2020, and we have again some more specific data that we can use. I think one of the things in talking to our Traffic Safety Bureau is that we do notice more volume of bicyclists, which is a great thing, but they're occupying the same territory and roadways as motor vehicles, and we have to work on that and get that safer in 2020. Car versus steer decreased, which is a good thing, maybe hopefully an indication of our work there from 47 to 31. So a fairly significant decrease. And what I did note also is 46% of our total accidents occurred on the 10 roadways that experienced the most accidents of the year. So almost 50% come from 10 roadways. Which is, it includes Nassau Street. The top 4 are Nassau Street, State Road, Mercer, and Baird. So we're going to be doing some significant work there as well too. The good news is most of those are minor. One thing we did note and that we're going to really concentrate heavily on in 2020 is the area of Baird Lane near Ugnaught, right up here. This is an area that's seen significant crashes right in that very specific area, and nearly 100% are due to driver inattention and unsafe lane changing. So we're going to be doing some selective enforcement education out there. We've done some in the past, but we're going to concentrate on that area this year. And this was all part of our strategic plan, just to kind of bring this full circle, is that we are getting much better at analyzing. We've been historically good at collecting. So we're really trying to drill down on this and get specific as to where we can make a real difference, as opposed to putting officers in different areas. Not that they're not needed everywhere, but trying to concentrate on those 10 top areas where we're seeing a lot of problems. And especially with the pedestrians, because those are your more serious crashes with injury. I think 100% involved injury. So some significant. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I can answer any questions on the report itself that you might have.
Ms. Rocco?
Yes, so there were just a couple of items in the report. And first, thank you for highlighting that and explaining some of the,
You just need to speak up really loud because you don't have a mic.
do I need a mic?
No, just
Okay.
let the chief keep it, just
Okay,
talk
no,
loud.
yes, I will talk loud, I can do that. So in the, I noticed for the summonses for unlicensed drivers, that it jumped from 3,
Unregistered?
no, there's both.
Oh.
For unlicensed, went from 3 to, last year to 13 this year. Did I get that right? Yeah, unlicensed driver. Last year, in 18, it was 3, this year is 13. And then also in unregistered vehicle citations, in 2018, went from 26 to 55 this year. And I was wondering if you have any ideas.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Excuse me. So, as you know, this year we've been increasing drastically our selective enforcement details. Selective enforcement details, I've spoke here before about where we put officers out on enforcement for specific reasons. We've been getting, as you know, the major complaint that we get constantly speeding. So you'll see that our speeding and our motor vehicle stops in general are up. Our speeding summonses have gone up from the selective enforcement as a byproduct of that. When you're increasing your enforcement actions like we have been, these are some of the byproducts that come from that. So you're naturally all of those violations that you just mentioned are secondary violations that come after a motor vehicle stop. So as motor vehicle stop increase, these things are found, somebody stopped, they produced their documents, and their license is expired. Most of the unlicensed summonses, without having the data directly in front of me, are overwhelmingly expired driver's license where somebody forgot to renew their license.
So, and yeah, if you don't have that information, I was wondering if it was related to many individuals who do not qualify for a driver's license, but that may change, or that is going to change.
And I could get that data very easily, but my guess is it's mostly the expired. The expired. It's the statute's broken into 2 subsections.
And then my second one relates to, and thank you for providing that report on the summonses versus warnings. And I know we talked about this in the past, how there's now you're providing it by demographics, that for white, non-Hispanic, in this report is half and half. That half of the summonses, I think if I read that correctly, the summons are, like half of the stops result in summonses, but then half are issued warnings. But then for the others, it's not the same. And I know in the past you have explained that sometimes summonses result because someone already had been issued a warning before, and then the next time it results in a citation. But that's not clear here. And I was wondering if there's another section that can be added where it would identify, I don't know, you tell me if it's possible, if someone is issued a citation because they received a warning already.
That would take a lot of, you're talking, 9,000, 10,000 more vehicle stops. It's good that we put this out, and we do about this in public safety. It's very non-scientific. It's kind of a snapshot, so it's
It's an indicator, something for us to watch,
Right.
and something for us to be cognizant of, but without that deeper dive, we have looked at some of the data, and as I explained previously, what goes into it is all the discretionary things, but also some of the more serious things like motor vehicle accidents that result in injuries where the summons must be issued, warnings, all those things. But we have it, maybe we can extract it and look at that, but it would take probably some significant work.
But I do appreciate having this report, and it isn't, something for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, I remember, I have another question, but we've talked about this particular screen before, and remember one of the things that you had said to me is that there are some things where there's less discretion, for example, speeding. So if somebody is, they're going 15 miles over the speed limit, the officer doesn't really have a lot of discretion to issue a warning versus a summons. So you pointed out that that was one of the factors that went into it. And then thank you, Leticia, for bringing up the previous bit about unregistered vehicles and unlicensed drivers, because I also noticed that. And what I was thinking, and maybe you were thinking too, is wonder if changes on the national level that discourage people perhaps from pursuing documentation might be part of it. But it sounds like you're saying that's, you don't
Again, I
know.
bet you that is part of it. I'm sure some of those violations, the overall violations that we see annually are due to someone that has not pursued a license because of the things that you're mentioning. Definitely, we run into drivers that are just unlicensed, they never applied for one. Probably, the significant majority are the expired license, but it is a definite piece.
It'll be interesting.
Yes.
Once this new legislation, kicks in,
Yes.
or I don't know if it has already, just to see where those numbers go. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on what you highlighted to us. So a number of the roads you mentioned as having very high accident areas are unfortunately not under our control. So we've talked about traffic calming, but we can't do that on Nassau. We can't do that on 206. So you talked about some you deploy officers, and what exactly, can you give me like a snapshot of what do you do in that case? Like people are changing lanes, people aren't paying attention. So what is the officer, sure, somebody does something and they get issued a ticket. What are the talking points that get suggested to people to try, in addition to the ticket or the summons, to?
Right, so we'll start with the public information campaigns, the variable message boards will put out high accident area, pay attention, stay off your phones, whatever the message of that day might be. We'll do that for a while. We'll have officers highly visible in the area, which usually bring motorists to more attention. During the first part of the selective enforcement initiative, we'll start with warnings. So we'll have officers out there, more officers than just one assigned to that area, from the Traffic Safety Bureau. And we'll start with just what you just said, talking points and warnings. We're stopping you because you made an unsafe lane change. We have a lot of accidents here. We go through a litany of talking points to bring their attention to what's going on in the area. And it starts like that for about a week or two. And then the second phase is more of the enforcement of the more egregious violations. So when we see more egregious violations, summonses are issued, also all the things you talked about based on driver history and the severity of the violation. I think that's an important piece. Some people we all do, we lose track of speed, we turn right on red where it's prohibited because we don't see the sign, and our officers are instructed to try to talk to the motorist and find out kind of what happened. Sometimes something's going on in life that has you preoccupied. It's not a good situation to be in, but once you're stopped, you realize it, you have a good driving record, and it ends there. And you go on, you never do that again. That's not the case with everyone. And some of these, as we know, some of these crashes that are occurring with driver inattention, especially with pedestrians, are causing injury. And the same thing in just vehicle on vehicle. People are being injured. And a lot of it, I have to say, a lot of it is due to driver inattention. People, I'd say the overwhelming number of our accidents are due to that. So I think speeding even is a driver inattention issue at times. A lot of it is purposeful, but a lot of it is because people aren't paying attention. So I think it's really something that we need to highlight in 2020, just to make people aware that we're out. The community, it's a concern for the community cares about it, the governing body cares about it, and the police department, is out there taking action. That's kind of our plan moving forward.
Just, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Mayor, just two quick comments. Just for the sake of knowledge for the public, the issuance of licenses to the undocumented goes in effect January 2021, so in about 11 months.
Thank you.
And the second thing, just want to commend the police force and what Chief Sutter said about in how you tackle accidents, et cetera. It's not just about enforcement, but you mentioned the word education,
Right.
which I think is extremely important. So I also respect the progressiveness of the Princeton Police Department. Thanks.
Excellent. And I just want to commend you and the department for collecting the data and analyzing it, and then also being able to report the reductions too. I think it's really fabulous to see that, and hopefully it's a result of, one
That's
would
the hard part,
assume
yeah.
that it's a result of the efforts that you've been making. I just had a couple questions. So one was, so every time there's a car that hits a pedestrian, the driver will get a ticket? Or
No.
not necessarily?
And that's going to be in the annual report, I break that out. So, I can answer that directly. In 2019, very low, there was one incident involving a crash with a pedestrian where the pedestrian failed to yield the right of way, jaywalking or, barging out in front of a car where the vehicle had right of way in the space. So we also do a lot of pedestrian education in the spring. We'll be doing that again, where we're out handing out talking points again, written talking points that explain to pedestrians what the laws are for pedestrians, and that you got to follow you're safe as you can be when you're following. It's dangerous enough when you're not following it, as it needs to be when you're not following the law with regard to the traffic signs.
But the 84%, you said, of pedestrians that were in marked crosswalks?
Yep.
For those, the driver would get a citation?
That's one of those non-discretionary.
Okay,
Yeah, the vehicle clearly failed to yield, and the pedestrian was in the marked crosswalk.
right, okay,
When we can prove that, the summons is issued.
okay, that's good to hear. And then, I don't know if you've collected data specifically on the Nassau and Washington and Van River intersection, but that's one where, even though Nassau Street is a state highway and is on the list, it's, we were able to get DOT to put in that all pedestrian cross, which, one of our motivations was to help address the issue with the turning and the dangers of the car turning and conflicting with the pedestrians. So I think it would be great to be able to go back to DOT and say, look, we've collected data on this intersection, and since we made that improvement, we'll share it with them if it's made a difference. Because I know there's interest in potentially, we've been pushing to implement that on other intersections on Nassau Street. If we had the data,
We do have it. We
that
have it
would be
regarding
great.
crashes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'd be interested in seeing that. Are there any other?
If I could make one quick comment, and I'm very happy to see that we have more bicyclists out there, but just from a very non-scientific observation, just me as a motorist, it seems to be a lot of bicyclists who think they don't have to obey the stop signs, etc. I see that quite often. And when we talk about education, that's maybe something that we need to educate
Yeah,
them
we
about.
do do it. We do it with the children and young adults for sure. It's one of our major educational points when we do interact. Yeah, I agree. The education component is important for that as well.
Okay, so I wasn't going to make a comment, but now I have to make a comment. Which is, when I'm out there driving around or riding my bicycle, I've noticed there are a lot of motorists who stop at stop signs.
Oh, I know there are a few of those too. But the bicyclists, right. Motorists, I think, stop here. I've seen many bicyclists. And it's not a motorist versus bicyclist. I like to think of them both. Well, when I get my bicycle out, I'll get back into it again.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions for the chief? All right, thanks, Nick.
Thank you,
I'll do it.
All right, and that's actually a good segue for the correspondence that's in the packet, and I just wanted to, oh yeah, I always forget that. I actually wrote a note, I forgot. So council reports. We'll start with Mr.
Oh,
Wilson.
okay. I should have known by now that I was going to be first again, right?
We can start, we can start on the other side.
Yeah. Well, I think it was.
I'm ready.
Okay, we'll start with Ms.
I'm
Deemer Day.
usually not ready, so I'm ready. Okay, so I have two reports from the Sewer Operating Committee. Just want to report that the engineering department is advertising for an engineer to work on sewer improvements, specifically to limit the amount of inflow that comes into our sewer pipes. And although that sounds like a mundane and not very interesting topic, it is actually fascinating. And it has really, really big potential for cost savings, which is another exciting thing about it. Because every bit of water that comes into the sewer system gets treated. That's expensive, and then more chemicals go into the environment. So we can both save money and we can reduce the harm to our environment by making sure that our sewer system, which is basic infrastructure, I am channeling David Goldfarb here, just want to put that out there, is really up to par. And I think it's, I'm glad that we've made the decision to hire someone for that position, and I think it's going to be money well spent. And then I just want to have just a quick word on something that'll be coming up on the agenda tonight, which is an ordinance on new sewer connection fees. And what this does is just bring Princeton's fees in line with what NJDEP recommends. So it's a slight increase, but again, we're just following the recommendation of the state DEP. And then just wanted to update you a little bit on Public Works, of which I'm one of several council liaisons, to say that we're starting to interview for the new director position, so that those interviews will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. And we don't know yet if we'll find our candidate from among those, but at least we're starting to make progress on that.
Yes, well, just really quickly, now on the 15th, the Permanent Parking Task Force held a community meeting of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. I see Mr. Floyd here as part of that task force, and David, in my opinion, and I think others would agree, that it was we had a great turnout, and actually some of our council members were there too. Great turnout, a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback as well. I think in general, the residents are excited and looking forward to seeing some change, and they truly seem to appreciate having the opportunity to have input, to be able to form. Yeah, no. So I was just going to say, we had some really great input, but which I think will be helpful for us as we're going to debrief on Thursday. So for when we plan the next community meeting, this one at the Tree Streets, before we move forward on implementing any type of suggestions for what the pilot program would look like. Did you?
Just to comment, it was a great turnout, but a majority of the people were from the Tree Streets.
So somehow somebody got the memo that it was we were also going to discuss the Tree Streets. So yes, but they were very. They also providing input, even though it was for the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So you can spread the word in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood to come to the Tree Street meeting.
Yes. That's a good one. But overall, I think it was very informative, and I think I heard from others that it was actually made the comment that it was one of the best community meetings that they had attended.
Excellent. Congratulations. Thank you. And thank you for taking the helm on this. It's not an easy issue, and you've been doing a really excellent job. So
I think
we
both feel good about it.
Yeah,
yes.
good.
I have two quick reports. One, the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee has started looking into the possibility of having an in-town cyclovia. Some of you may have been to the cyclovia that's been held out on Quaker Road in past years, and we still want to do that again this spring in May. but one of the members met with Lieutenant Maurer to discuss the possibility of an in-town cyclovia in September. And he was encouraging, and we identified as a possible location Witherspoon Street between Valley Road and Paul Robeson, similar to, but even improved, we hope, over the Gay Pride Parade route that people probably remember from last year. So the next step is reaching out to the members of the neighborhood, both merchants and residents, to see how they think things could be improved and make sure that there's widespread support. But I'm excited, and I hope other members of council are excited about the possibility for this opportunity to raise the profile of alternative transportation in Princeton. And then the second report, I wanted to say a little bit more about the Friends of Harrington Woods, who Mia already made mention of earlier. Mia and I actually had an informational meeting with a couple of the folks from Harrington Woods. And they're making good strides since council passed the ordinance validating their lease. They've identified most of a professional team that's going to be helping them with the process. And they've also identified, with the help of one of the members of that team, some potential funding sources, including from the state office, I think, of historic preservation. There would be a need to actually have a determination that the site or the property is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. We as council probably have to be involved as the owners of the property in supporting that application. I referred it to HPC, at least initially, because they have the expertise to give guidance to council on how best to support this. So they were supposed to go, did they make a presentation in the public comment section at HPC today? And they're actually on the agenda for March 16th.
So I'm going to say the other update about Public Works is Eve and Deanna and Liz and I met with the first of we're going to be interviewing a number of consultants who can help us to hopefully do a comprehensive analysis of, or waste audit, analysis of recycling, food waste, solid waste, and make recommendations on how we can how we can have a more both environmentally and financially responsible approach to our waste stream. And they're also going to be looking at all the practices, or not this particular consultant per se, but we're going to be looking at a number of consultants who can provide these services. And the other thing that they hopefully will be doing is analyzing all the practices of our Public Works department for both environmental and economic efficiency. So, for example, the third rail of leaf and brush pickup, and so we're excited about that. And David and I have been making our way through weekly code. This is not Public Works, but segueing to the planning office and department. We've been working our way through code harmonization, and we've now just finished all of the definitions, and we're going to be submitting those to ZARC and then the planning board for approval. But we have a pretty ambitious schedule to make our way through finally consolidating the land use ordinances and putting them online. And we're actually meeting this next week with the company that hosts our code book, and we're going to try to simplify the process for people who are getting online, because there are a lot of the ordinances that have already been harmonized, but they're not actually online together. So that's the second thing. And the third thing was, did you talk about public transit? No. Okay, so we have a meeting, Michelle and Eve and I are gonna be having, and Deanna are gonna be meeting with a number of community partners, to talk about what to do. We have an issue with the freebie, which is probably not gonna make it as long as we had anticipated, and there are a lot of issues related to the fact that it's unreliable and expensive, and we're looking for a, I think we're hoping, best case scenario to maybe look towards partnering with the university, as we discussed with the president Eisgruber earlier, for a more robust transit, public transit network in town that would, include all of the new sites where affordable housing will be built. Josh is shaking his head now. But, all right, anyway, we are looking into all sorts of, what's that?
We're dreaming big.
We are dreaming big, yes, we're dreaming big. So, lots of stuff going on in those 3 areas. Thank you.
All right, back to me. Just some quick reports here. First one is Maggie's Playground is reopened. So the Recreation Department's maintenance crew worked pretty hard installing all new benches, restaining the sandbox, power washing and repairing the pavers, and doing all the other necessary prep work to make the site ready for all the new equipment that was installed last month. So they will be announcing when they'll do the official ribbon cutting, but it is open to the public now. The second thing is also from the Recreation Department, just an update on the Hilltop Park improvement project. The municipality put out RFPs for final design work and delivery of the construction documents regarding like the artificial turf and issues like field lighting and installing those at the park. The municipality received about 13 proposals, which are currently being reviewed by both the Recreation Department and Engineering, and also by a subcommittee within the Recreation Commission. So we plan to interview about 3 to 5 of the firms by late March, and then make a recommendation to council to award the contract in mid-April. And just a point of privilege, just to clarify my statement about the bicycles earlier, if I may. What I meant was that with motorists, we know what the laws are, because we're required to get a license, right? What I'm thinking with bicyclists is they're not required to get licenses. Sometimes I wonder if all bicyclists...
In Europe they are.
In Europe, but not here. So sometimes you're driving down one street, going down one way, you see a bicyclist going the other way, for example. At night, like for example, I know state laws, they're supposed to have some sort of lighting device or whatever, but you see some, most do, but see some at night who don't. So sometimes you wonder if a lot of bicyclists actually know all the laws that apply to bicycles. So we care for safety of our motorists as well as our bicyclists. So just to clarify.
Like in 60 seconds. Thank you, Dwayne, for clarifying.
Thank you.
So I have a couple bridge reports. So I think the mostly good news is that the Alexander project continues to be mostly on track. And then I just brace yourselves for this next report. Is we had a meeting with DOT about the structurally deficient bridges on Washington, which are set to be replaced. The good news is that those can be done without shutting down Washington. Because there's more room there, they're going to be able to set up, the exact details have not been totally determined yet, but the traffic will continue while they work on the new bridge. So unlike Alexander, it's not going to be quite as disruptive when that project happens, and it's not going to happen for another few years, but it's just the planning takes a very long time, so the discussions have already begun. A lot of what we've been bringing to the table are concerns about pedestrian safety and some of the other things we've been talking about here tonight with the police report, especially because it's a dangerous crossing with the canal, and they're even exploring potentially putting a pedestrian crossing underneath So if people are familiar with the canal up by Kingston, you go underneath, and that might be a better way for folks on the canal towpath who don't have to come up to Washington. You won't have to come up to Cross. So those discussions are continuing, and I'm sure will continue long past my being here. Good luck. All right. Next is the Mercer County Improvement Authority. They're the folks who do the recycling pickup for us. They are supposedly starting to tag bins that are violating the recycling laws. So I'm looking out at tonight's crowd, and I know that you guys are exemplary in how you do your recycling. Just for anybody watching this, if you put your recycling in a big plastic trash bag, you are taking your recycling and making it trash. So please don't do that. Put your recycling, it's not trash, so put it in the recycling bucket without any sort of plastic lining. That's the main violation that they're finding. They are not tagging every single bin that has contamination in it. I actually was sort of gratified that the complaints I got that day were from people who were ratting out their neighbors, not from people who had been tagged. So, if you saw someone put something in their bin that they shouldn't have last week, I would say you could be helpfully warning them that they should clean up their act. But they're going to be moving around the town in terms of putting out the red tags, and it's super embarrassing to get a red tag, because everybody will know, so do it right.
What are the consequences?
The consequences is they're not going to pick up your recycling, so then you're going to have a lot of recycling for the next couple weeks, and it's just, look, it's like the point is we want to do it right. It's a big problem in this country that people are putting stuff in the recycling bin that's not recycling. The New York Times actually had a really great phrase, which is, now I'm forgetting what it is, but it's sort of like optimistic recyclers.
Wishful recycling.
What is it called?
Wishful.
Wishful, right. So just because you want to not have to throw something away doesn't mean that it's recyclable and you're actually causing more of a problem. All right, that's more than you ever wanted to know about recycling. There is, if you go on the Princeton website, you can get a link. If you have any questions about which number of plastics recyclable or not, all the information's up there. And there's also something called the Recycling Coach that has a lot of really good information too. That's an app. It's an app, correct. The other thing I just wanted to let my colleagues know is I got a last minute invitation from the Board of Ed to attend their meeting tomorrow night to talk about our affordable housing plan and especially the impact on the schools. Councilwoman Sachs has, as the school board liaison, has agreed to come with me. And thank you. Oh, well, whatever. Just want to let folks know if you are watching TV of the Board of Ed meeting and see me there, don't be surprised. And you're welcome to come too if you'd like. And are there any? Yeah.
I forgot one thing. I guess nobody mentioned it, but I'll mention about the refueling station task force. We are going to move to the first phase. So that's going to be removing the canopy, building a wall on 3 sides where we can so that you can't see the refueling station, and doing a stucco. And I think that's all we're going to do in phase 1, but we're looking at screening on the other side. And then Taylor is going to do a presentation to the Shade Tree Commission tomorrow night to see about planting, because we have to have certain types. They have to be native to New Jersey, to do some more evergreens, because right now there's a lot of deciduous, which doesn't really cover and screen from 206. So anyway, so we're moving that along. I just reword that.
Thank you. And are there any staff reports?
I have a few. In addition to the Washington Road meeting, there is another meeting on Friday this week about Quaker Road, another DNR canal bridge that is being looked at to be replaced. So it's in the same phase, it's in the concept development phase, which means they're looking at alternatives and then construction won't be for 3 to 5 years, so that one's also happening. Witherspoon Street, we had our first public meeting on February 13th here in this room, actually, and gathered quite a few comments, which have been posted on the website under the Witherspoon Street page. We also attended the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood meeting on Saturday, got great response there as well. We'll be following up with individual stakeholder meetings, and then we have the next follow-up meeting is March 30th at the public library from 6 to 8 p.m. So at that meeting, what we're looking at doing is presenting the feedback received and showing different ideas of how we could address what we've heard. And we also are putting the final touches on the survey, so we'll be sending a survey out. I did notice that Walkable Princeton has done their own little survey, and I did see that there is a disclaimer that it is not sanctioned by the municipality, but I'm just reiterating that they are Walkable Princeton's ideas, and they're not necessarily representative of the town. So we will have our own survey that hopefully will be out, I think, by the end of this week. Another update, Linden and Spruce, our contractor has returned. He is going to be starting work. He arrived on site today, and hopefully we'll begin working tomorrow. So we'll continue to get updates on that. But at this point, he's completed 4% of work in 4 months. We're continuing to work, yes, with attorneys on that one. Harrison Street, happy to say that we will have a pre-construction meeting on Monday next week with our contractor to kick off that federal project for Safe Routes to School. That's the replacement of traffic signals at Harrison and Hamilton and Harrison and Franklin. So this is pre-construction meeting. Basically, the contractor gets to meet with us and the state, learn all about the federal requirements for the project, and he can start the process of submitting shop drawings and ordering materials. We don't anticipate actual physical construction work to take place until probably March or at this point April at the earliest. I attended a micro-mobility session at DOT last week. It was hosted by the Voorhees Transportation Center at DOT for Bureau of Research, and the speakers were from Hoboken and Asbury Park, talking about their e-scooters, and it was mainly e-scooters, but also bike share. Those are two components of micro-mobility. A lot of great information, and a lot of the focus also was on equity, to make sure that these types of last mile solutions are serving the populations that they need to. So a lot of good information that I can pass on with the Bike Advisory Committee from that. And then lastly, on Saturday night, we received a Project of the Year award from the Professional Engineering Society of Mercer County for Cherry Valley Road. So that was a nice honor after the 8 years of work on that project.
I put that on as like, I just forgot to
So yes, so that was nice. We shared it with Montgomery as we shared the entire project with them.
Yeah. No, that was great, and it was, David and I were very proud to see you get that and have Princeton honored there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it for me.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. I think someone mentioned the Princeton Future meeting to you this weekend. I know that's not a lot of warning time, but I know they're talking about the Witherspoon corridor. And is that something you'd be able to?
Unfortunately, I'm at a soccer tournament this weekend, so I'm
You have to
not
have your
available
priorities
to
straight.
attend
Michael is gonna go, right?
They're not, Princeton Future is talking about the Franklin.
Right,
future.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. But
right,
I meant
you're
to
right.
mention that during announcements anyway, for people in the audience, that the Princeton Future is having one of their sort of discussions and charrettes and community visioning processes this weekend on Saturday at the library, 9 to 12. I think it's really important for community members to participate.
But we should also let people know it's not an official municipal
Princeton
meeting.
Future,
So,
not
yeah, it's Princeton Future, so it's important people know what the public hearings are versus just more of a community brainstorming session, so people are able to get their voices officially heard too. Are there any other staff reports? No? Okay. So now we'll move on to correspondence. So now it's not as much of a perfect transition, but before we've had a debate about biking, and there was a letter that I want to just refer everybody to that's in the packet from the Princeton Bike Advisory Committee with all of the events that are coming up over the next few months. So there's the walk and bike to school events, the Wheels Rodeo, and the, how do you pronounce it? Is it Cyclovia? Cyclovia?
Yeah.
Neither, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. Okay. And now we come to our ordinance public hearings. So the first ordinance is ordinance 2020-5, an ordinance of the municipality of Princeton regarding projecting signs and amending chapter 17A of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and chapter 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I see Josh Schinder here in the audience, and I want to thank Josh for the tremendous amount of his time that he spent on helping us get to this point. I just want to thank our professional staff and all of the committees that this went through. So the Economic Development Committee, I especially want to thank Historic Preservation Commission, because this was, I think, more of a challenge for them to get through, and they really engaged in a productive way, and then also to ZARC for their work. And this continues these, I would say, more modern ordinances in the land use part of our code book. So it contains illustrations, which hopefully makes it more user-friendly, and when businesses are looking to put up new signage, they'll find it an easier process because of what's spelled out in the ordinance, and what they come to us hopefully will, it'll be easier for them to put something together that doesn't need a variance. We've heard, I think, for many, many years about the need for projecting signage. I would say one of the themes of tonight's meetings is what's old is new again. So I think if you look at some of the most historic signs in town, they are the projecting variety. And I heard a fun story about chickens that we can get to later. We'll get to that. But we'll stick one thing at a time. So I don't know if there's questions on this ordinance, or if there's a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Sack, seconded by Ms. Lambros, and Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, sorry. I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. I got all carried away.
Don't say anything then, Mike.
All right, I'd like to open up the public hearing, yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Roger Schatzman. I serve on the Historic Preservation Commission. I just wanted to make sure that Elizabeth Kim had suggested an amendment to one section. And let me back up by saying the Historic Preservation Commission does understand and support the need to streamline this process. Philosophically, we're in tune with that. But there's some language in section 5M that's, at least in my ear, a little draconian. And Elizabeth, this would suggest some alternate language, I believe, was discussed at the planning board meeting. I've got a copy of an email with the language? I don't know if it was.
It's included in here, yeah, so I guess we should make it clear when we might have to do the motion again and just make sure that we put on the record that it was deemed not to be substantive, so we could have the new language in there when you move it to approve. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing on this ordinance? Yeah, Mr. Zinder?
I guess I would just say that I think this is really a tremendous step forward for the town and certainly for the merchants in town. This is the culmination of 5 years of effort related to signage that my office has put in and certainly the Princeton merchants have put in. And it is still just the first step, okay? And we've started the next step, which is sort of consolidating all the signage and clarifying other signage issues, things, awnings, stuff like that, that come up all the time that cause impediments to merchants being able to successfully open, run their business and get exposure in a stylistically, historic, appropriate way. And so I just want to applaud that this is going through and also encourage everyone not to take this as a conclusion, but rather be encouraged by this to move forward on the remainder of the signage consolidation and clarification work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing on this ordinance? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and then bring it back again, Mr. Cohen.
Yeah, I just want to comment that lest you fear that it's going to be another 25 years because Josh said this is just the first step. He's done a lot of work on all those other signs and they've been brought to the Economic Development and Historic Preservation Commission as well. So we're well on the way to getting the broader work codified.
Great. All right, I would just ask Ms. Sachs if you can make the motion again and just make note of the changes to letter M in the ordinance that when you make the motion that you want to acknowledge that there's been slight changes to the wording there.
So I'm moving the ordinance with the signed ordinance with acknowledging that the changes to letter M have been duly noted by council members and approved.
Great, perfect. And it's been seconded by Ms. Lambros. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
The ordinance has been unanimously approved. Thank you. Yay. Thank you, Michael. All right, next is ordinance 2020-8, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton adding alternate members to the Civil Rights Commission and the Princeton Bike Advisory Committee and amending Chapter 2 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. I don't think so, no, because it's already been introduced at the prior meeting. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask if there's a motion to approve.
I will move.
Moved by Ms. Fraga
I will second.
and seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any further discussion or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
The ordinance passes unanimously. Next we come to tonight's ordinance introductions. The first is ordinance 2020-10, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating the keeping of backyard chickens on residential property and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And this is also been a product of many months, if not longer, of work by the Princeton Environmental Commission and the Board of Health. And I wanted to see if Ms. Niedergang wanted to say anything about this.
I would.
Okay.
So this was just personally, this was a real introduction for me on how long it takes to get things done. But I have to say I deserve very, very little of the credit, and I'd like to thank Karen Zembel and Jenny Ludmer for just I cannot imagine the countless hours that you put in on seeing this through, the wonderful education events that you stage with the help of other members of Princeton Environmental Council, and also to Health Officer Jeff Grosser, who reviewed the ordinance over and over again. There were many rounds of negotiations to make sure that this was something that preserved the health of the flocks and the health of the Princeton community at large. And also our animal control officer, Jim Ferry, spent a lot of time reviewing and discussing. So this is the work of many, many hands, and I'm just so thrilled to have this come to fruition. And thank you all for all that you did to work on this.
Excellent.
And I would just like to say that I'm not a chicken person myself, but some of my absolute favorite people in the community are chicken people. 3 of them are sitting right here. And I know how hard they've worked on this, and I think it really, I've come to believe that the chicken people are really some of the most outstanding citizens of Princeton, and so I'm really excited to pass this ordinance.
There are times when I think we all feel like we're living through an episode of Parks and Rec.
Before we move on, I'm sorry, I just have to point out one thing in the ordinance where it says, quote, "As used in this article, the term nuisance does not include a neighbor's mere dislike of chickens or other egg-laying poultry." And I just, having been through this ordinance many times and having just read it again yesterday, I was hysterical. So I really appreciate that we had to point that out.
And I appreciate the fact that reading the council agenda packet, I learned what egg-laying poultry is, and they point out some other subspecies, and that's pretty cool.
It's an education.
Okay. There will be assuming that this is successfully introduced, there will be a public hearing, but I don't know if there's anybody who wants to speak to this tonight, or if you want to wait. Oh, yeah, there are all these people who signed up to speak on the chickens. Okay.
Does it make sense for us to meet tonight, or?
Well, we do both, if they want. So, if you don't have to. Yeah, so I'd like to invite up Jenny Ledmer.
So, just quickly, as you know, I'm speaking as a resident tonight. I just want to make that clear also, but I've been raising chickens for 7 years in Princeton, and my children love them as pets. I love them for their eggs. My yard loves them for the fertilizer. And so it's a win-win. So I definitely want to echo Eve's thanks of the Environmental Commission and the Board of Health, as well as Jeff. Really appreciate all the work that's been put into this, and the last line that you pointed out was the reason for all of this, because that was happening. So I'm really glad that we have an official rule and I'm now legal. So, or not yet, but hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks. Karen?
Hi, so I just want to, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, thank you, Council, for bringing this to fruition again. I just want to say a couple things about the process of how we came to this point. So on December 12th, 2018, the PC unanimously passed a resolution in support of Princeton residents who keep hens and other egg-laying poultry in their backyard for personal production. As part of the resolution, the Commission resolved to support an education campaign for the public. After the education campaign, the resolution provided the PUC would draft an ordinance for Council's review to regulate the backyard chickens in a safe and responsible manner. The first installment of the education campaign was on May 5th, 2019 at Mountain Lakes, where the benefits of chicken ownership were incorporated into larger seminar on composting and dealing with food waste. The second installment of this education campaign was on October 5th, 2019 at the Princeton Public Library, and a seminar was devoted solely to backyard chickens. The library estimated we had 80 folks attend the discussion and additional 70 coming and going and playing with our chickens on Heinz Plaza. The program was lighthearted yet informative, and everybody who attended was supportive of backyard chickens in Princeton. The PSC has done extensive review of other ordinances and articles and has partnered with the Board of Health, the Animal Control Officer, chicken owning member of the public, who's right here, and a member of council. The group has come together and made a determination that this ordinance allows the most responsible way to permit backyard chickens. The PC held a meeting on October 23rd, 2019 to present the draft chicken ordinance to the public and to host an opportunity for the public to comment on the draft. And nobody commented negatively on the ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks. And Alexandra?
So I don't think there's very much I can add to all of that. I do want to express my gratitude as a Princeton resident. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have a very clear ordinance on responsible chicken ownership. We all know that there are environmental impacts that are great, producing carbon emissions. It's great since we no longer have a curbside composting program to get all those food scraps to the chickens. As a family, we're trying to reduce our carbon emissions, so we have fruit trees and bushes, and it's all integrated with the chickens, so it's fabulous. But the one thing that maybe we don't always realize, and I think with Princeton Council, we're so proud of Princeton as a township. We build strong communities. That's what Princeton's all about, is the way we come together. And I'm realizing another side effect of having the chickens is the burgeoning gift economy. There's the Buy Nothing Network, and I'm able to meet new people, grow my community, and give away free eggs at the same time. So it's just one of those things that's bringing people together. People stop me all the time, ask me about chickens, meeting new people. It's just a great way of enhancing our community. So I thank everybody for considering this.
Great, thanks. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I would love to introduce
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Niedergang and seconded by Ms. Froggatt. Any other final comments? I just want to thank the group that's worked on this. I know that it's been controversial, I think, in other towns, and the fact that it's just you guys here, I think, is a testament to the outreach you've done, so thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone-Lambrose?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sacks?
Yes. So the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on Monday, March 9th. And we'll probably see you back then. Next is ordinance 2020-11, an ordinance amending chapter 34 of the Code of the Municipality of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, concerning sewer connection fees. And this is an annual ordinance where the Sewer Operating Commission recommends annual adjustments to the connection fees.
I have a question, because in reading it, I think I only saw reference to for residential. So is there anything, does it apply the same for commercial if they were commercial establishments?
Yes, the rate, the fee that's listed is the same fee that's then multiplied by the gallons per day that NJDEP specifies for that use, and that's how the sewer connection fee is calculated.
So I guess that's something for a separate conversation. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about this ordinance or comments? Is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Ms. Niedergang.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone-Lambrose?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sacks?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on March 9th, 2020. Next we come to our resolutions, and the first resolution tonight is 2089. Resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding for an inclusionary project to be located at 301 North Harrison Street, designated as Lot 1.01 in Block 7401 of the tax map of Princeton. And to get on the floor, I'd like to know if there's a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any comments or questions on this?
I'm gonna abstain. I mean, I don't, I know we discussed this already, but can we bring up any additional points now, or is that not appropriate?
You can bring up whatever points you want.
Okay, well,
You have to speak up though.
So I see in letter E, Princeton shall not impose any undue cost generative requirements on the development. This is an inclusionary, it's not 100% affordable, so I don't know, that doesn't seem, I mean, I'm reading this now again. I'm wondering why we would have that on the inclusionary part.
Yeah, this is merely stating what the law already requires, or in this case prohibits. So even in an inclusionary development, you can't have the undue cost generative requirements.
On the whole development.
Correct.
If I may add, it says we can't impose it.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that folks can agree to something.
Correct.
Right.
No, that's correct. I mean, it all goes to whether it does indeed present a realistic opportunity. It's to make sure that the zoning we put in place isn't just a fiction on paper, that the project is actually going to be financially viable and can come to fruition.
I don't want to interrupt, just quickly, 301 North Harrison Street, for those who don't know their addresses, is the Princeton Shopping Center. So this is the proposed housing development from Eden to the shopping center.
Well, I mean, anyway, I'm abstaining on principle because I feel uncomfortable that yet again we are being forced to vote on something basically, on very short notice without being fully comfortable with what we're voting on, and I hope that we can change this dynamic going forward on the rest of the developments that we're voting on. And
I'd like to add that my understanding is that this will go through the planning process, and planning site review, and that this is a memorandum of understanding. So this is the first step, and we need to comply with our.
And I know that we just went through a memorandum, we just went through 2 months of hell because of a memorandum of understanding that was signed in December, and which we signed away a lot more than I think was realized at the time, and I feel like we are continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again. And maybe it's because we just don't have the time, but I feel like despite the things that we've taken out of this, I still feel like we keep getting into situations where it's not clear to what extent, after we've signed these MOUs, the planning board or any other elected entity has the ability to.
I will say the thing that I see different in this is that this is the inclusionary development, which is not something we own. Whereas with the Pearl Senior Development, that was something that was municipal land or going to be municipal land. It was our project.
Right, but it was also.
You got to do one at a time, we can't sort of like wait to
So
be
that's my
recognized.
distinction in my mind anyway.
Right.
But the issue at the planning board was less about Pearl and more about Outlaw. And it was the same language, which basically gives them a tremendous amount of control and us significantly less. But I also just the point is that I think the community needs to understand we are not doing this because we want to do it. We would love to spend a lot more time on these things, but this document is due in court a week and a half ago, and
Yeah, this is Mr. Williamson, and then
If I may add, I share some of your concerns, Mia, but at the end of the day, we're operating in an environment where everything's not perfect, which means we have time constraints, etc. But I think we have enough information to know that even in an imperfect environment, we're making at least the best decision with the time we have to make, with the resources we have to make, knowing or having an idea of what all the different parties want. What we have here in the MOU, I think, is good considering the totality of the circumstances. It's not exactly 100% what I would have wanted, what other folks may have wanted, but considering all these constraints, sometimes we have to make decisions. It's like, on the battlefield, you have to make decisions based with the resources you have and the time frame you have. And they're not always in the best environment that we would have wished for if we had, like I said, we could do it by fiat if we had a Gene Simmons, the best environment. So that's being said, I think the planning board, final site plans have to come before the planning board. The planning board is going to get input. We're not giving away everything. We're just making the best decisions we can make considering the circumstances we're in.
And Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I want to point out that some of the most objectionable language from the FANET agreement actually was removed about the design being at the total and complete discretion of the applicant. Number two, I want to point out that I think that this design is actually a better starting point than the design was on the FANET site. So that's another, just purely from an architectural and planning standpoint, I feel more comfortable with this MOU because of the virtues of the design that's been submitted as the basis for the MOU. That's basically what I wanted to say.
And I would just say too, I think let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here too. So this will be, as far as I know, the first development, the first inclusionary development where the town has put in no money, where it's more than 20% inclusionary. And I think that's a significant thing for the town and hopefully something that we might be able to carry going forward. I know this whole process, we felt just an immense amount of time pressure. And I think we also have to realize, both as a governing body and the community, that that is by design. That, not our design, but that is by the design of this Mount Laurel process. It's to put the squeeze on municipalities to act. And I feel like we've been caught up in this. I feel like Princeton's been a very good actor, but that is not recognized by the court or by this process. And so it's like, that is the nature of it. We're not really supposed to be given a lot of time to deliberate. We're supposed to be given just enough time to act. And I share everybody's frustration, and I'm sure everybody here shares the frustration of wanting more time. In this particular case, I don't know if more time would have gotten a different outcome, and in truth, more time might have gotten us a worse outcome. And I think that having the 22% affordable is a major victory that I think we should be proud of. And this is also a great location, and I can't think of a more perfect location that symbolizes one of the main tenets behind what we're trying to accomplish with our affordable housing plan, which is smart growth. So where can we build housing that's walkable to transit, walkable to shopping, and walkable to jobs? And unless you're going to build something right smack in the middle of Palmer Square, but then it's like you're not walkable to a grocery store. So here you're going to be walkable to a grocery store, to a pharmacy, to a bus. It's a perfect location in so many ways. So, I don't think we can make the perfect be the enemy. I'm trying to persuade you off of your ambivalence, but I respect it too.
I agree with all of that. I just am concerned that we're sending a signal to the people we're negotiating with that they can take a very belligerent and harsh tone with us, and it has no consequence. We still vote yes. And I'm concerned that we're sending a signal to the people we're negotiating with that they can, treat us in a way that's not.
I think I'm going to
collegial would be an understatement.
I'm gonna jump in here because I do feel this is the very last piece of the fairness settlement that we agreed to. That in order to, and as some of you may know or do know, I've had some major concerns about aspects of the plan, but I agree with everything the mayor said about this particular site, the fact that it's inclusionary, the location, the 22%, all of that I think is great. And, you know, we're playing hardball with people that, you know, have their own interests. But this was something that has to get done for us to be in compliance with the court. This is the last of those pieces, and so I'm hoping that, I know that the schedule will continue to be accelerated after this, but we'll be moving into a process that's more normalized, where we have, you know, a certain series of reviews that are set up, that plans will go through, and I think that will provide ability for the citizenry, for Princetonians to give input. We're moving out of the behind the scenes part of the negotiation, which has been unbearable because of all the decisions that have had to be made under this pressure and under the court, you know, sanctioned imposition of negotiations in which you could not speak openly. So I'm hoping that, I don't know if I'm being naive, but I'm hoping that from now we're moving into something where these conversations will be in the open and where we have a more normal review process. And in a month you can tell me how ridiculously optimistic I was being, but I am hopeful this is kind of the last nail in this part of the wall, coffin, whatever the appropriate line is. Hopefully not a coffin, but yeah.
Yes, it was. Okay, I think I don't think anybody has any further comments, so, is there anybody from the public who'd like to comment on this?
I just have a question. If this is a conceding of utility connection fees, I was having trouble following this. Have you, what
No,
is,
no.
what is?
We're past that one, no.
Okay,
No.
what is
This
Ms.
is-
Sachs?
That was the last ordinance introduction that you were talking about.
Okay, what is the concern on this one?
So this is the memorandum of understanding
Okay.
with Eden's, the shopping center owner.
Yes. go ahead.
For the inclusionary housing development, so it's 200 units.
Yes,
Of the 200 units, 44 will be affordable.
yes.
And the memorandum outlines that provision, and it has a concept plan. There was some back and forth where the municipality was hoping to get some more concessions from Eden's that they did not agree to at this point. And that I think the message we've gotten is that, you know, given that it's an inclusionary development, they're not obligated to grant us any of those things that we've asked for, even though we think that it would help the project and help the shopping center and help the community.
No, but that's not really, my concern, Mike, was basically that we seem to find ourselves in the exact same situation.
I was concerned that we seemed to find ourselves in the exact same situation that we just went through with Avalon, where there was an MOU that was signed, and then we got to the planning board and there was a long discussion about what did that MOU lock us into. And there was some fairly onerous language in here that was very similar, which said that the concept plan, that the developer had final, basically that we were locked into the concept plan and that the developer was the arbiter. So that's been removed now, but I just feel like we keep getting into these situations where we are not in the driver's seat and it's uncomfortable, and yes, it is the nature of the beast to some extent, but I would love going forward for us to at some point feel like we have more control. I do feel like it would be great if we could stay on. There's so many different moving pieces it'd be great if we could stay, you know, especially our staff and consultants, and could stay on top and help generate the flow of information to us in a more timely manner. That would be great.
I just hate for the public to think that they just forced what they wanted on us, because that's not what happened. Of course, there are more concessions we would have liked, but I don't want the public to think that we're walking away with a bad project either. I mean, just like the mayor said, it's a good inclusionary project. There's certain things we would have wanted which we didn't get, but what we're getting, I think, is ultimately good for the town. And until someone can give me a better alternative, considering all the limitations between time, the court process, etc., you know, if you can't give me a better alternative, then I'm going to vote for what I think is in the best interest of the town. Thanks.
Yeah, I would also say that we had our fairness hearing, and after the fairness hearing, we basically have 3 months or 4 months to do all of the zoning that's that will help accomplish the affordable housing we've pledged to in the fairness hearing. So it's going to be tight because we have, you know, this is probably going to be one of the easier zonings to do, but we have to do the zoning for Franklin. We have to do, I mean, the zoning for the Thanet side is basically done. We have to do the comfort, right, the comfort. We have to do the Nassau Street overlays. So there's several zoning ordinances, and you know, it's like we have to do the introduction here at council. We have to send it to the planning board for review. Each of these is going to have an impact on the neighborhood, and the community and neighbors are going to want to have some say in what's in there. So we have a lot of work to do in a very compressed time, and so that's the nature of the beast. And again, I would just say, like, it's designed to make us uncomfortable and like to sort of have us move almost like at an impossibly quick pace. And I think I don't think even though we're all frustrated by it, I don't think we can fight it. It's like we have to accept that this is going to be a very quick process, that it's going to be all hands on deck. We welcome the community's eyes on this because we want to end up with the best product we can. And we're trying to get the information up as quickly as we can. I think with some of these agreements, one of the frustrations is we put a version up that then gets amended. Yeah. And I think we're just asking the community to understand this is a work in process, and what it means to include people is that sometimes you're going to see the sausage, and it's not the final product, but the alternative to that is waiting until 5 minutes before we vote sometimes to get it out there. So, we're just asking for everybody's understanding. This is a quick process. It's challenging. We're doing our best. You can see there's oftentimes, with good reason, I think each of us could be on either side of some of these votes. So that's the story. All right. I think this has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
I'm
oh, you're an aye. Wow, that's all right.
Well, you-
Broke you down. Okay.
What happened? Broke me down.
Oh, okay.
Passed unanimously. Next is 2091 resolution authorizing a construction contract with S Brothers Incorporated in a not to exceed amount of $767,288.34 for improvements to Heatherstone, Princeton, New Jersey. And this has been a project that's a long time coming. I think it might even, did it predate consolidation?
No.
No.
It just predated me as municipal engineer.
Okay.
It was one of the Bob gifts.
Excellent. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2092, resolution approving a professional services agreement for McManaman, Scotland, and Bauman LLC for bond counsel and legal services related to redevelopment, environmental litigation, and other non-public finance services for 2020 in the amount not to exceed $100,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Lambros. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2093, resolution authorizing payment of attorney fees and costs to Fair Share Housing Center pursuant to terms of settlement agreement of Mount Laurel declaratory judgment action in the sum of $75,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Sacks, seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor?
I have a
Yeah,
question.
Mr. Blake, yeah.
What is the justification for settling to pay part of their fee?
This is part of, if you look around the state, this is the final thank you that Fair Share Housing gives to each municipality for the pleasure of the time they spend in helping us reach our affordable housing settlement. Is we help fund that and then I think keep them going for their next town. And so this is standard across the state.
But I don't think you have an option, right? It's part of
It's part of our fair,
I thought they were being funded by the Condo Developers Association or Contractors Association. Why?
That would,
You file a plan legally, they contest it. They were probably out of line with their numbers more than the town was.
right,
And the town got to pay part of their fee?
correct. And if you go around the state, you'll see it, every single town that has a settlement has had to pay something in the neighborhood of this amount. Most of us could probably write a book about this affordable housing process and how it's been conducted and how the state legislature has really sold municipalities.
Their responsibility.
They have, I mean, I would say that's putting it mildly. It's like they have, abandoned what the legislature's job is. And so this has become a court process. There's no laws. We've just been thrown to the mercy of the court. And so
So the judge didn't say, no, you don't have to pay that.
that judge did not say you don't have to pay that.
This is part of this is part of our settlement. But I would like to just say, I know that I've only been doing this for about 14 months, and others of you have been doing it, Mayor, for much, much longer. But I do have to say that I think Fair Share Housing, despite some of the frustrations of dealing with them, they're fighting for a need that really exists, and I shudder to think what it would be like if we didn't have them. So, despite the difficulties of dealing with them, I think that, and despite the fact that they get some of their money from developers and share certain interests, I think that they're on the right side. And I'm glad to be essentially moving on from that part of the process.
I agree with you. I'm also glad to be meeting on. I was at on a panel discussion last week about how apparently the state actually has a provision that there will be no unfunded mandates to the municipalities, which we know is laughable, but I think that this is one of the prime examples of this. This should be, if the Supreme Court granted special status to Fair Share Housing to pursue this litigation across the state, and given that we are in this position because of the failure of the legislature to pass laws regarding the third round, that this should really have been, if Fair Share Housing was granted special status by the state Supreme Court, it should have been the state that was funding Fair Share in, and I agree, it's like they have, it's important to have housing advocates, and I think everybody here would agree that it's, sometimes people need a push to build housing, but it's, this would have, when you think about the amount of money this is, this would have gone towards building someone's home.
Yeah, and
that's where it is.
Again, they started this round with the Builders Association bankrolling them. And yes, I like Fair Share.
Right.
I know Kevin Walsh very well. I know, you know, Adam very well, and I know Peter very well, Peter O'Connor. But yes, I just was surprised. I thought Builders Association was picking up the whole tab for that.
That would be nice. I encourage you to make that suggestion, and they can give it back to us, and we'll use it towards building one of these beautiful homes in our plan. Okay. Did we vote yet? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2094, resolution authorizing a supplemental professional services agreement with WSP USA in the not to exceed amount of $24,638 for the preparation of a final report for the Paul Robeson Wiggins Hamilton corridor study.
I have a question on this.
Okay.
Now this, I know we paid $45,000 for the study. Now this we have to pay because, I know I asked this question before, can you just?
It's additional work. So the initial study was more of a planning exercise, and the questions and comments that came up as part of the review of the planning documentation is requiring a little bit more engineering work, looking at right-of-way, looking at how the recommendations are affected by changes in traffic volumes. It just requires additional work.
If we spend this, are we actually going to execute on that plan? Because, I mean, they had the bike lanes off the road, and I know the bike advisory committee wasn't happy with that. So does this mean we're going to execute? Because I just don't want to throw, good money to bad, so to speak.
No.
We're not going to do anything with it.
No, so as part of the studies, they're also looking at what speed and volume changes are going to occur in the corridor after making improvements at the intersections. And so the idea is, once that study or that analysis is done, then we can go back and look at what type of bike facilities are then warranted and allowable within the corridor. So it may be that there are other options besides the side path, which should come out as one of the leading recommendations in the concept study. So we would then evaluate what we could do to accommodate something on-road. I know that's been a concern.
Well, I know, I'm just concerned that we're spending this money because we didn't get the results from the first study that the Bike Advisory Committee wanted, even though it seemed like a pretty logical solution. So, I mean, if we're gonna spend the money because we wanted to do traffic calming with circles and that type of thing, but if it's just because we didn't like the off-road bike lane, then I would probably oppose this, spending the money.
So,
Does that make sense? Because I saw the study, and the result of the study was an off-road bike lane, not on-road bike lanes, and I know the Bike Advisory Committee wanted on-road bike lanes, and that would be, it would be a significant change to the.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was specifically about that. But I think, Liz, you had said that the problem with the off-road solution that they proposed was that aesthetically it was basically not really in keeping with, no.
I mean, I'd like to speak to it a little bit, because I was pretty integrally, yeah. The problem with the off-road bike lane, or the technical problem, was that there are questions about whether it fits in within the right-of-way. Basically, they had recommended it to follow a certain path, and especially when you avoid trees, major street trees that want to remain and stuff like that, it became doubtful that it would actually work the way that they were recommending it. So this is a little bit, as Ms. Duncan mentioned, one of the hopes, but they had not recommended the on-road bike lanes because the speeds on this road don't make that a viable option either. So one of the things that's being looked at is, well, with these other changes of traffic calming, maybe we can slow the traffic down enough that the on-road bike lanes will be a valid option. And they may also discover, by doing more in-depth engineering, that the off-road shared path is an option that can be made to work, even though it wasn't looking like it would. And then there are a couple of other options that, if neither of those things is viable with additional study, there are a couple of other options that are of interest that they would look at as well. The issue with them is that they're likely quite a bit more expensive, requiring major changes to the roadway. So I think it's work that really needs to be done in order to bring the study to a successful conclusion.
But it seems to me like we're basically, continuing to pay a consultant until we get the right answer that we like. I mean, then why pay the consultant at all? Why not just just come up with the answer that we want? I mean, it's like, so they come back this time and it's not the answer that, well, it seems like we're actually paying to come up with an answer that the Bike Advisory Committee would like.
I really think that's an unfair characterization. I think what we're doing is we're paying to get an additional level of information that we need, that maybe we thought we didn't need quite as much detail when we embarked on the process, but through the study that's been done, it's become clear that we need a higher level of information in order to make a valid decision. And I don't think that the decision is predetermined. I mean, we may find that the side path can work, but the on-road bike lanes can't work without major changes to the roadway. And then council will have a real choice to make as to whether we want to spend, $800,000 for the shared side path or $3 million to rebuild the whole roadway. I don't have any idea whether those numbers are close to being the right numbers, but there will be choices that will come out of this additional level of work. It will not be a predetermined outcome that the bike committee wants or that any other constituency wants.
And that's been the whole focus, is it's a complete streets view of the corridor to see what will work. It was never, this is what the answer's gotta be.
Yeah. So it just seems to me if we've spent 45,000, we should have had some, that would just, I don't know, just.
How much additional are we spending now?
About 25.
25. So can you explain the right-of-way issue?
So we do not have any real idea if the paved roadway sits in the middle of the land we own, or if it's skewed on one side or the other side. So giving a broad brush to say 10-foot wide pathway in place of a 4-foot or 5-foot wide sidewalk will fit without right-of-way impacts. We can't make that judgment call. And so that's part of what they're gonna look at, is trying to identify where that right-of-way line is compared to where the pavement is, and could the side path fit in, what are the impacts?
I mean, you've got a good part of that is all along the cemetery piece, and then along Westminster, and along all the backyards of the Hawthorne Street houses. So I would think there's a lot of right-of-way, there's only those 1 or 2 blocks of the homes right on Hamilton before you get to Wiggins that have trees and other issues. So I don't know, to me, it seems like spending a lot of money for something that the other company should have finished.
It's the same.
It's the same company.
That's even worse. Are they giving us a guarantee on
There are
this?
change orders to contracts for consulting services all the time, Michelle.
And construction contracts, yeah.
And it's when you learn stuff through the original contract that you need more work to get to the end point. I mean, that's the way consulting contracts work.
It's kind of like the bike mobility plan. It was it was a guide as to what could be the recommended treatments. But then once you really get into the design of things, you know, sometimes there may be recommendations that you go a different direction. And so instead of having that 30,000 foot level on this plan, like the bike mobility plan, we've been asked to give it, you know, 5,000 foot view.
And you, I mean, you think that this is within the guidelines of what makes sense?
Yes.
And I'll go with your expert opinion, because why this is, it seems like a
I
lot.
thought when we talked with this, Deanna, I mean, I thought when we talked about this in, I don't know if it was traffic calming or whatever, that you felt that this was, in fact, yes, you felt that this was excessive and that we should not be proceeding with this.
No,
That was my sense, that
No.
you didn't feel like it was necessary, like that the answer came back and that we had to work with that answer.
no, I was going to try to do it with my own staff,
I see.
but then I've lost my assistant engineer and we've taken on sewer work and a few other things, and so I don't have the ability to do it in-house. And so that's why I'm contracting with a consultant for it.
And what are the chances that it'll come back with, well, I mean, it's basically these two options.
No. No, I think there could be 3 or 4 options.
Okay. Can I just for point of reference, would this be information in the future would be covered under a GIS system? No, we're not gonna know that, because that would seem to be really useful information to have going forward, but.
I stand corrected, yes. If we had a GIS system where we actually geolocate all of our road points, yes.
So would that be a money-saving thing in the long, I know it costs money to do that, or it wouldn't be worth it? I know I'm getting off
I think it could
topic
be
here.
useful, actually. I know that, I think this was like a pet sort of issue of Jenny Crumiller's, that a lot of people don't realize the extent of the right-of-way, and it leads to issues. So people feel like, I mean, people naturally feel like they own their whole front yard, but most of us don't own the whole front yard, and it's municipal property that's close to the street, and some people have quite a bit of it as municipal property, and so before people make investments, it's like you don't want to be, you know, planting super expensive things.
Big issue for the arborist is,
Correct.
Where is the.
Right, and so it, you know, would be a nice thing to, you know, help with communication with homeowners.
What do you think of this, Liz?
I mean, it feels like this is something we've been talking about for a long time, wanting to improve the complete streets on the Hamilton-Wiggins corridor. And it sounds like we're not ready to move forward without, I mean, some of this seems more technical. It's just like, what part of the road do we own? And it's like, that takes time to, I guess, figure out and map on the ground itself. So it's like, I think this is a question for council that I think is important, because if there's not an interest in doing something substantial to the complete streets on Wiggins Hamilton, I agree, it's a waste of money. So, but you know, if folks are interested in trying to do something here, and I think that the discussions over the years has been, you know, the reality is it's hard to make every single street a complete street. And I think that the thinking is that you're never really going to be able to make Nassau Street a great place to bike, because you can't be on the sidewalk, and depending on who you are, if you're a Lycra person, fine.
No.
If you're not, then.
We'll talk about this later.
Okay.
Nassau Street has more potential than almost any street in town.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of extra real estate
Okay.
that's not well used.
Well, fair enough. I mean, if that's the feeling too, then it's like maybe we should focus the resources on, I mean, you also have DOT, which is gonna make it more difficult.
That's
But
true.
anyway, I would say that the philosophy has been, this is a great street that we could take better advantage of. We know there's a ton of young person traffic on it. It's probably like the first major street, aside from Nassau Street, that like parents send their young people off to like, you know, spread their wings on to get from the middle school to the library or into town. And it's like, it could be improved. And we know that the intersections have a lot there's a lot of opportunity for improvements, we'll put it that way.
There's some bad intersections.
Right, and so it's, you know, and I think that this report has indicated some improvements there, but it sounds like, you know, we need more information in order to be able to make the major investment. So I think the bigger question is there appetite for making that major investment? And I think it's good to take like a check and say, is this an area where we want to make a major investment? I mean, we've got a lot of projects going on. We got Witherspoon Street, we have other things, and it's...
But just remember, the major investment is not just to get bike facilities. There's a ton that's part of this project. Desired traffic calming,
right, yeah.
You know, motorist improvements and stuff like that. So don't think of this as, do we want to spend a ton of money to make a nice bike lane on Wiggins-Hamilton? It's a big set, complete set of improvements.
And I think Deanna answered it too when she said, you know, staffing is an issue, and if this is helping to augment staffing for things that you just, I mean, we just have so much bandwidth, so I get that. Right, that's fine. I just want to make sure.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ms. Fraga, is there any comment from the public?
Just one observation, if I follow this correctly. It seems that we paid the $45,000 or whatever originally. They gave us a plan, but the plan isn't something that we know actually works. So why would we pay for something that we didn't know would work, and now we have to pay additional money in order to see that it actually works? So whether the contract was written incorrectly or whatever, or maybe we should just go back and say you need to give us a plan that works, and that was what your contract said. I don't know what the original contract actually said, but it seems to be kind of if the contract didn't say that, then we have a process problem. Why you pay somebody to give you something that you don't know will actually work? So
we paid them to find out if it could work, and they
don't know that we need more information.
No, it doesn't. So now it seems to me that we're going to pay them more so that they can come back.
So we're saying the same thing two different ways. We're paying them because they gave you something that you don't know actually works, because they're saying they don't know where the right way is.
I don't, like, respectfully, I don't think that's the right way to explain what happened. We started saying that this is an unsafe road. And we're looking at the road not just for drivers, but for everybody who's using the road. And so the charge to WSP was to come up with options to make this road safer for all users, particularly pedestrians and cyclists. Okay? They came back with some options at a high level, and when we started to dig down, we realized we need more detailed information in order to, I mean, there's like, we were just talking about this before with the housing that's going to be built at the shopping center, any of the other things. You start at a high level. It's like, what are our goals? What are our options? It's like the devil's in the details. You start working on the details. It's not like they screwed up. It's like they're coming up with these concept plans, and it's like when you get down, you realize, all right, we need more detail, and it's not like you can just snap your fingers and get the detail. That takes work too. So it's part of the process to get to the point where we're ready to actually do the work. So I don't think this is an example of someone making a mistake. I think it's just an example of this is how the process works. And it's complicated. This is a major project. It goes all the way from, does it go all the way to Bayard?
Yep.
Yeah, it goes all the way from Bayard all the way to Harrison. So it's a significant stretch of roadway, and it's a really, I don't know who made this road originally, George Washington or someone. They were like, not sober, okay? It's just like, no intersection is like a perfect, like, there's no 90-degree intersection along the whole stretch. So it's complicated, that makes it unsafe, and it's just, it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, well, the thing that is convincing me, Mark, would be that Deanna's staff, she just doesn't have the staff or bandwidth to be able to do the details now as far as right
But
of
she's
ways.
not gonna have, we're not gonna have the staff to implement it either. I mean, like, we will
Well,
have.
hopefully we're gonna be hiring someone to
Exactly.
replace Tejal.
Right.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so it's 5 in favor. Ms. Sachs is abstained. And the resolution passes. Where are we?
Number
95.
Next.
Number 6.
2095.
So
Resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with O&S Associates in a not-to-exceed amount of $44,500 for preparation of plans and specifications for Spring Street garage repairs. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A move by Mr. Cohen, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson, and,
I have
yep,
So I have a very similar question to Michelle's, as this is a similar case where we spent a certain amount of money in 2016, 2017 to look at some structural problems in the garage. There were some structural problems, we identified them. And now, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just, like, it's the same thing. And I didn't catch it on number 5, but I did catch it on this one. We're now spending money again to identify the problems. And I know over the course of 4 years, additional problems can occur. But, and then I saw also that there are actual plans to do the work in the summer and fall. So my concern was, if we're really doing the work, obviously we need to assess where we are.
Correct.
We're really committed to doing the work this year, that's been budgeted for and planned.
It's been budgeted for a few years, from what I understand.
Okay.
So this was in the
This was
public
something
works
that Bob
budget.
Huff was supposed to be driving and got derailed.
So again, my concern is that if we're gonna spend the money to assess what the problem is, I would only go forward with that now if we were gonna spend the money to fix the problem now, because we're not gonna fix the problem for a couple more years. Let's wait and assess the problem closer to that time.
No, we have the money budgeted, and we
Okay.
have Wes Pollard now as our parking superintendent, who is full steam ahead to
Okay.
shepherd this through.
So we're gonna get it done. Okay.
And, yeah, so, like you said, it's been a few years since
Right.
the last assessment. We have to see if there has been additional, deterioration of conditions, so that we can fully specify all of the work necessary to bring it back up to where it
Okay.
needs to be.
Thank you.
any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2096, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Stormwater Management Consulting LLC, SWM, for professional engineering on-call services in an amount not to exceed $20,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2097, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Stormwater Management Consulting LLC, SWM, for dam inspection services in an amount not to exceed $14,900. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. Any questions or comments?
Where are our dams? Sorry.
We have 3 within the Mountain Lake Preserve,
Okay.
upper, lower, and the site.
I made everybody leave. Okay.
And
Okay.
then we have one up by Fieldwood, between Fieldwood and Griggs Farm, called Basin G. And then our 5th one is at Smoyer Park.
Okay.
So is that a naming opportunity for someone?
Rather than detention basin Z. There you go.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2098, a sign of spring. Resolution authorizing a one-year extension for 2020 of the license to operate canoe and kayak rental concession with Stephen Androsco doing business as DBA, Griggstown Canoe and Kayak Rental, also known as Griggstown Canoe Rental, at a fee of $28,000. Is there a motion to approve?
We'll move. and
Moved
hope
by Ms.
that
Braga?
The bridge is open in time for them.
Yes.
Well, there's a provision inside there that if it's not open, then we get a reduction of how much our costs going out, yeah.
Well,
Every month.
I think he's
Isn't he
paying
paying
us, so.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
well,
pays
well,
us,
well,
so
that was
it's a
way
reduction of the fee that he
Yeah.
will pay us.
Right, that's it.
So it's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2099, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Software House International via the Sourcewell contract for the purchase of
Dossier.
Dossier, thank
Well,
you,
what is this?
maintenance management system in the amount of $24,942 for the first year and $10,044 for the second and third year. It's purchase of Dossier maintenance management system.
It has to do with fleet maintenance, the vehicular fleet
I'm
maintenance.
gonna have Mr. DeShield.
Basically, what it is, it's a fleet management software that allows to track all the vehicle maintenance that we have in terms of tracking all the vehicles, the maintenance that goes on with each vehicle, and track all of that cost. That's what this is.
And I just want to comment that I hope that, something that I've had some conversation with Sustainable Princeton about is moving to a more holistic fleet management approach. I had met with a vendor at the League of Municipalities Conference. They're interested in coming and talking to us. And so I'm supporting this, but I'm hoping we'll be using something different in the near future.
So we're gonna buy it and then not use it anymore?
Well, it's a license for this software for, I don't think it's a purchase, right? I mean, this tells
You're
what the cost for the
purchasing
license
the
is for
license.
3 years.
Correct.
And then we'll have to have a new license agreement after that if we keep on using this software.
All right, is there a motion to approve? Has that already been moved and seconded?
No.
No, okay, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Cohen,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any further questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2100. Resolution authorizing the Princeton Housing Board to sell the unit located at 134 Briggs Drive for $86,964. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Williamson, seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 21-101. Resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with McMahon Associates for the not-to-exceed amount of $28,755 for traffic engineering services related to the improvement of Witherspoon Street. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Lambros. Any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by single vote. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda?
Do we
We've
already
already,
to note that we removed an item
Item 10
Yeah,
was
we-
already.
already?
I think it's item 11, we've already
Yeah.
It was
approved.
11,
No, it's
20-112.
20-111, which was item 10.
No, the one,
no.
20-112 was
The
actually.
global impact.
What are you talking about, the ones that we did already?
The New York to Philadelphia.
Yeah,
Very well.
That was, yeah,
That's number 11.
20-112. 12, which is number 11.
All right. I think the clerk will
Yeah.
figure it out. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Lambros, all in
Different number
favor?
of websites?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Consent agenda passes, and is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Mr. Cohen, all in favor?
I was gonna say for the record,
Meeting is adjourned.
I was gonna say for the record, both Dave and I voted for it.
One never ends.
It was